My name is Eddie Lauren. I am 28 years old, and I've already ruined my whole life. This is the story of how I took a substance that brought me to my life today in hell. I was 12 years old when I used any kind of drugs for the first time. Like so many others, it was alcohol that got me started. That wonderful elixir alcohol that everyone loves. I used it because I wanted to forget things. I wanted to forget how my best friend had thrown himself off a bridge, or how people who were supposed to protect me had attacked me. But above all, I wanted to suppress the voices. They weren't just annoying, they scared me. Before I left home, my parents took me to a doctor who diagnosed me with schizophrenia. For me, this meant that I had so-called auditory hallucinations. I heard voices. Voices that only existed in my head and constantly commented on everything I did. One of them, I called it Steve, was the loudest. When I was just walking across the street, it sounded like this in my head. Look at you walking. Like a cripple. Everyone's already staring at you. You can't be beaten for embarrassment. But that wasn't all. Most evenings, the voices started shouting at me. They always shouted the same thing. Kill yourself. You're worthless. Just kill yourself. But I didn't do that. Even though I was so messed up, I wanted to live. So I ran away from home when I was 13 and would never see my parents again. I soon realized that alcohol wasn't enough for me. When you're sleeping under a bridge and in alleyways, you need harder stuff. By offering services to various dealers, which I won't describe in detail, I got my hands on some H. It finally gave me what I wanted all along, to really shoot up. It was wonderful because the voices finally stopped. My life now consisted of somehow getting more H, finding somewhere to sleep and something to eat. There were shelters for the homeless that also provided you with soup and water, but they required you to be clean for at least 24 hours. I couldn't and didn't want to do that. Hey, keep your stupid soup. I'd find a banana or a packet of stale sausage in a garbage can. It was a warm summer night. I was just about to tie off my arm and give myself a shot when I had this wish for the first time, this dream. I imagined how it would have felt if everything had been different, if I'd never taken drugs at all, if I hadn't run away from home and I'd finished school, that maybe I could have one of those offices in one of those skyscrapers overlooking the whole city. I'd be wearing a suit and working on an expensive computer. That was a nice idea. Somehow I felt so stupid with the syringe in my hand. I undid the rubber band that I'd used to tie off my arm, and I didn't put the syringe in. Instead, I swapped it with Max, and he gave me a shirt in return, which had almost no holes and only a few stains. I washed it in the river that ran under the bridge where we lived, and then I hung it up on an old chair that I cleaned first. Tomorrow, I would try to get a job. The voices hadn't stopped, but I ignored them. I was the boss now. The next morning, I combed my hair, put on my new shirt, and set off for the city center. I didn't really have a destination. I just looked for advertisements on the windows of the various stores. I found that clothing stores, some burger shops, and a specialty electrical goods store were looking for new employees. Great. First, I introduced myself in one of the burger shops. They weren't averse at first and had me fill out a form. However, when they asked for my resume and references, I had nothing to show. This irritated them, and they said they'd get back to me. I had given them the phone number at the St. Joseph Center, and they said they would pass the message on to me, but I doubted that this would happen. The other stores also asked for resumes and the like, which made me think, wasn't there a computer and printer at the St. Joseph Center? Maybe I could use it briefly. It was Father McAndrews who opened the door for me. "Hello, Eddie. I haven't seen you for a long time. Our rules haven't changed since last time," he said. "Hello, Father. What I thought, I get it, but I'm not here to sleep. I have a completely different request. Can I use your computer?" I asked. Father McAndrews seemed puzzled and wondered what I was up to. "What's the point, Eddie? We don't want anything to do with a business like that, son," he replied. "It's not about business, Father. I'm clean. Well, since yesterday, at least. I tried to get a job today, but everyone asks for a resume and references. I don't have anything like that, but if you'd let me use your computer for a few minutes, I could make a resume and print it out." The father had noticed that I was wearing a clean shirt, had combed my hair, and I was clear-headed. He nodded. "Come in, boy," he said. He even had a template for resumes on the computer, and all I had to do was enter my details there. While I was printing out my resume, the father put the icing on the cake. He had written me a recommendation with the signature and stamp of the institution. Since he believed that I was clean, he said I could sleep in the facility later if I wanted to, and how I wanted to. It had been years since I had last slept in a real bed. Full of vigor, I went back into town and turned up at the stores I hadn't visited before. 2 fashion stores and a pizzeria said they would be in touch. 1 burger shop even copied my resume and my recommendation from the patron. Maybe this was the jackpot. Satisfied, I made my way to the St. Joseph Center late that evening and told the father about my little success. He was genuinely happy for me and showed me to my room. I put my duffel bag down there and then joined the line for the shower. It took a while before it was finally my turn, but it was an incredible feeling to finally feel warm water on my skin and to feel clean again. I felt like a human being. The voices in my head grumbled a little, but they were much quieter than usual. The next morning, I packed my duffel bag and wanted to leave, but Father McAndrews stopped me. He said someone had called for me. A Judy from the Peacock Burger Shop wanted to tell me that the manager wanted to speak to me today at 3 p.m. It was about my application. My whole body began to tingle with joy. The father let me stay here for a while to prepare for the interview, and when the time came, I went to the burger shop, freshly showered, and told the counter that I had an appointment. The waitress led me back to Mr. Presley's office. "Good afternoon, Mr. Loren. Please have a seat," he said. "Good afternoon, thank you, sir," I said, and sat down. Mr. Presley was sitting at his desk, apparently reading through my resume again. "Have you been successful in your long search, Mr. Loren?" he asked in an uncomfortable tone. I was a little confused. Did he mean my search for work that had only started yesterday? "I'm sorry, sir, I'm not quite following you," I replied. "Have you not read your own resume? It says you left Colston High School 4 years ago and have been in a period of self-discovery ever since. Have you been meditating for 4 years, sir? If so, you must have come to some interesting conclusions about your own existence and the universe, didn't you?" he grumbled. Now I was even more confused. Apparently, he wasn't impressed by my resume, so why had he invited me? "I'm sorry if my resume was unclear, sir, but I assure you that I'm willing to learn and will always do my best at work." I said that to diffuse the situation somewhat. "Ah, yes, what's your best? I mean, anyone can throw fries in the deep fryer, but when I look at your writing, I doubt it. Who writes school with an H before the L? Schoohl? Oh, your name? There's a 4 in your first name? What is your name? Eddie or EDD4IE? I felt like I was reading a monkey's application," he grumbled at me. He certainly wouldn't give me a job. There was a better chance that he'd punch me in the face, as red as he was. Please forgive me, Mr. Presley, but may I ask why you invited me for an interview? You don't seem very convinced by me." "Job interview? Who said anything about a job interview? Listen, I have to work hard to feed my family, very hard. Then I'm sitting here at 10 p.m. and instead of going home to my wife and son, I'm reading through your totally stupid application. You've stolen my time, sir. Not in 1,000 years would I hire you, not even if you paid me for it. The fact that you applied to me with this piece of paper is impertinence. A useless bum like you has no place here. Get lost, he said. He shouted and threw my resume at me. On my way out, it took all my willpower not to burst into tears in front of the people who were eating there. Even on the street, I kept telling myself that everything would be fine. I'd get a job soon and be able to afford my own apartment one day. I could still make something of myself. The voice in my head, the one I called Steve, Steve saw it differently. At last, thank God, someone has realized what a useless, stupid bum you are. Thank you, Mr. Presley. You've made my day, said Steve. I wanted to ignore him as I had done in the last few days. Are you finally going to end yourself? Then we'll all throw a party because the world will be a better place once you're gone, loser. He got louder again, louder than ever before. Loser, loser. End yourself. You're a damn loser, you idiot. Steve roared in my head. Stop talking, I shouted back and grabbed my skull. People on the street were frightened and looked at me as if I were crazy. But that's exactly what you are, you stupid junkie. Look at you. You can't even write your own name. And you think you're going to be something? Steve said and laughed. Maybe he was right. Today I didn't even go back to the St. Joseph Center because they had rules there. To stay there overnight, you had to be clean for at least 24 hours, and that wouldn't apply to me. I needed alcohol. I needed H. I needed peace from Steve, and I got all of it. I gave up my dream of living the good life that night. Instead of frying burgers, I scored and shot up, sleeping under the bridge again. What the hell? However, it was now harder to get money or drugs, because now I was 17 and the dealers didn't want to have anything to do with me. So I turned to the practice that so many of my neighbors under the bridge used to do, begging. That made me very uncomfortable. The others wrote things like, need to eat, or for my dog on their signs. I, on the other hand, wanted to preserve the last remnants of my dignity and wrote the following on my cardboard sign: do any work for a small donation. I wanted to do something for my money and not just rely on the mercy of others. It didn't go well. I got far fewer coins thrown into my bowl than the others. When I offered to sweep the yard or wash the car for a few donations, they refused and quickly moved on. You see, they pay you just to leave them alone. No wonder I wouldn't want a stinker like you anywhere near my house either, Steve shouted in my head. So I stopped doing that and concentrated on begging. Sometimes I pretended to limp, which worked well and brought in some good money. So I lived from day to day and was happy when I got my load of H. However, it became more difficult when the police arrested one of the dealers. It was no longer so easy to get hold of the stuff, so it became more expensive. My friend Kenny had an idea that we could still get some. He knew a kiosk that was relatively remote, and the owner counted the money every Friday evening and then took it to the bank. Kenny had a fake gun that looked very real. I wasn't comfortable with it, but the prospect of having to spend the whole night with Steve in my head made me agree. It was a Friday at 9 p.m. when we went into the store with socks over our heads and threatened the owner with Kenny's fake gun. "Hey, throw the money in the bag. Go on, old man, or you'll catch a bullet," I shouted, trying to sound as threatening as possible. We didn't even realize that he was pressing the button under the counter because we thought only banks had that. Kenny tossed in the bag, and the old man slowly started packing up money. Then he slowed down a little, and some even more, and grabbed his chest. When the guy fell over, we could already hear the sirens. Damn. Then everything happened so fast. The cops arrested us, and it got worse. The owner of the store, he died of a heart attack he suffered while we were robbing him. And then there was Kenny's fake gun. Turned out it wasn't a dummy. It was a real gun. We both got 25 years for armed robbery and involuntary manslaughter. Kenny went somewhere in Ohio, and I was sent to maximum security prison. Somehow it was bound to happen. I was now 28, and if I survived the next 25 years, I would be 53 when I got out. Many people thought that going to prison as a junkie wasn't such a bad thing. After all, you had no choice and would get clean. Of course, they thought wrong. It was much easier to get drugs in prison than on the street. There really was everything here. Weed, H, meth, a true paradise for the addict like me. To get more H, I prostituted myself. That worked quite well here. I was already 28, but the inmates here weren't as picky as the dealers on the outside. You've finally found your purpose, you loser. You've come to the right place. Then the poor people on the street won't have to put up with you anymore, Steve said in my mind. My cellmate Mike was the first person I ever told about Steve. He had killed a man with an axe, but he was still the nicest guy I'd ever met. He had told me that his sister had also heard voices and had killed herself at some point. He didn't want me to feel the same way. My friendship with Mike gave me strength, but every day life in prison was tough. We were beaten or otherwise beaten up by guards. Sometimes there was no shower for weeks and the toilets were flushed while we were showering just to torture us. We could shoot ourselves up with drugs and sometimes good H too, but that wasn't enough for me. At some point, Mike heard about a new strange drug that would literally take you to another place. The stuff was supposed to be so strong that it would really make you feel like you were in another world. We got it through a new guard who'd been working here for a month. The risk was high, however, because there was a good chance of dying from it. The smallest amount of the stuff, you didn't even have to overdose. Unlike me, Mike really believed that it could take you away from this place. He'd been given a life sentence for murder, and of course he was desperately looking for a way out. Eventually, he managed to get some of the stuff. He showed me the syringe, which was filled to the top with a green liquid. I preferred to stick to the H myself, while Mike injected himself with a little bit of the liquid. The next morning, Mike was dead. The syringe was still hanging in his arm and was 99% full. My only real friend on this planet was no longer there. Before the guards made their rounds and counted the inmates, I removed the syringe with the green liquid from his arm and replaced it with mine with the leftover heroin. None of them cared about his death when they found him. They put him on a stretcher and made fun of the fact that he'd pooped himself as he died. I'd kept the syringe with the green stuff for a reason. "At last, you're finally listening to me and ending it," said Steve. Yes, I would finally listen to him. That evening, I sat alone in my cell in the exact spot where Mike had died. If a small drop of this drug killed him, I'd try the whole batch. That would surely take me to another place. To the cemetery, that is. With tears in my eyes, I untied my arm and got ready to inject myself. "It's been a wild ride, you stupid loser. Take care," Steve said in my head. "Take care," I replied conciliatively, and injected myself with the entire contents of the syringe. Colors, vibration, falling. Is this what it felt like to die? I was suddenly afraid of the nothingness that would come when my existence was over. Had I made a mistake? I had no idea. The colors intensified and then everything went black. I opened my eyes and took a moment to get used to the brightness. Where was I? I found myself in a room that reminded me of a doctor's waiting room or an office of some kind. Apart from me, there were a handful of other people sitting here, all filling out notes or simply waiting. Had I survived and been taken to a doctor by the prison guards? Or was I dead, and this was the waiting room for new arrivals in hell? A huge muscular guy came in. He was wearing a far too small nurse's outfit and had a bag over his head. He had a badge on his chest with a smiley face on it. It said Team Peace. The way he looked, my theory about hell was more likely than a visit to the doctor. The big guy came up to me and handed me a clipboard with a form on it. The form said in big letters, Application Form, Team Peace. There were a few questions underneath. I didn't know what else to do, so I grabbed the pen on the side of the clipboard and filled in the questions. Age, 28 years old. Gender, male. Height, 5'9". Have you ever been to Ruza or Izdalar? No. Those places didn't mean anything to me. Do you suffer from arachnophobia? Fear of spiders? No. Why was that important? Would you consider working with corpses even if they can be slightly rude? Yes, no, or maybe. What? Rude corpses? I just ticked, maybe. Do you have any experience working with syringes? Yes, I had that. That was the last question. I wanted to give the clipboard back to the muscular nurse, but he waved it away and indicated with his hand that I should leave it in the hallway on the left. I went out into the corridor and found a small counter on the left. A little boy was sitting there, also wearing a Team Peace badge. The name tag read, Lucas, Senior Vice President of Marketing and Human Resources. I handed him the clipboard, and Lucas read through my answers. You know how to use syringes? He asked. Yes, I have some experience with that, I said. Great, you're hired, said Lucas. I had a job. A job in hell, but I had a job. Lucas gave me my Team Peace badge, and I pinned it on. If only it had been that easy in life to get a job. The little boy showed me the building. It was huge. The sleeping quarters for employees had their own wings. They weren't luxurious, but you didn't want for anything. There was a TV, books, a tablet, which you could order something to eat or drink from, and a comfortable bed. That was more than I had had in my whole lifetime. Lucas told me that he had to leave the old testing facility because it was no longer safe in this world. The secret place where this facility was located would be much safer in a long-term headquarters for Team Peace. Are we in hell here? I asked. What? What makes you think that? You think hell looks like an office building? The little boy replied. No, I just thought, well, because I died and then... Dead? You look quite alive to me, Mr. Lauren. You came to us because you were desperate. Team Peace also gives a home to outcasts. You're arrived now, Mr. Lauren, said Lucas. You know, that sounded kind of nice. As we drove down to the basement, I told him about the St. Joseph Center and that Team Peace somehow reminded me of it. We stopped at basement 3. The doors opened, and I was immediately hit by a disgusting stench. The hall must have been an acre in size and was home to thousands of bodies laid out on wheeled tables. Some of them looked fresh, others were badly decomposed. In the past, we've often had problems with employees who simply couldn't handle syringes. Some of them put them in the wrong place. Some somehow managed to inject themselves with the elixir by mistake. Your task will be to inject the elixir into the abdomen of the ladies who have kindly made themselves available to us. 1 dose for each corpse. The Model 369 Mother is easy to handle and will not cause you any problems after the resurrection. They will sit up and wait to be used afterwards. If one of the mothers is found wandering around, you simply guide it back to the place in a friendly manner, Lucas explained. I was unable to answer verbally and just nodded. I had a job, but did I even want this job? Lucas left me alone, and I looked at the syringes stored in the metal container. I was treated well here and given decent accommodations, but this was kind of weird work, really. Was it right for me? And was he serious that the bodies would get up if I injected them with this stuff? Maybe I should just leave. Are you crazy, you loser? We finally got a job, and one where we're treated well. Come on, let's get to work. Steve thought, speaking to me in my head again. I don't know, isn't this kind of sick? Resurrecting the dead? And how did we get here anyway? I asked Steve. That was the first time I had a real conversation with him. Otherwise, he just commented on my life. Maybe I didn't have schizophrenia, but a multiple personality disorder. The doctor at the time called it dissociative identity disorder, but said that I didn't suffer from it, that it was schizophrenia. It doesn't matter. People are nice to us for the first time in ages. We're not treated like dirt, and we have an important job. I'm grateful for you to finally making something of our lives, said Steve. Steve offered to do the first shift. I didn't know exactly what he meant by that, but I accepted his offer. It was an interesting experience. I felt like a passenger in a car sitting in the back seat. You could see the road, but you couldn't influence the driving behavior yourself. Steve had never done that before. I watched as he took one of the syringes and walked over to the first body. The woman was young and looked like she'd been run over, poor thing. Steve put aside the blanket covering her, and she was naked and pale. He injected the elixir into her abdomen and threw the syringe into the garbage can. Then he got the next syringe and injected it into the next test subject. I thought he did a really good job. When he had already reached number 16, the first body sat up. The woman's stomach was now bloated as if she were pregnant. Now we also understood why this model was called Mother. At some point, I took over for Steve, and we managed to produce about 100 mothers until we got really tired. Before I went to bed, I reported back to Lucas in his office. He was happy that I was making good progress and wished me a good night. That was nice. Finally, someone was nice to me. In my room, I looked at the menu on the tablet. It was almost endless. I could order pizza, sushi, steak, or enchiladas. I'd never tried sushi before in my life, so I ordered some norimaki with salmon, cucumber, and tuna. Less than 5 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, the sushi was there in a box, but there was no sign of a delivery man. I was surprised at how good it tasted and decided to order some more for breakfast tomorrow. Over the next few weeks, I continued to make friends with Steve and worked with him on the mothers. It worked quite well, and apparently the management was very happy with us. One day, Lucas called me into his office, and dutiful as I was, I immediately got in touch. "Hello, Eddie. You're doing a really good job so far," he said. "Thank you. I also enjoy working for Team Peace." The man of peace noticed that too. I told him about your experience with the St. Joseph Center, the one that takes in homeless people and offers them accommodation. "Can you imagine setting up a center like that for us?" he asked. Me? Setting up a center for the homeless? Well, I guess so, but I'd need help and some resources, I said, surprised. "Oh, you'll get everything you need. As you know, our boss, the man of peace, is a loyal servant of the 7 demon lords, including Lucifer himself. He thinks that the Church of the Devil also needs a better external image. That's why you're going to open the Church of Lucifer's Peace Center for us. Incidentally, the Church of Lucifer is an official religion, and everything is registered and correct. Your only job is to set up and run the center." "Can you do that?" asked Lucas. I agreed. I wasn't aware that I was working for the devil himself in a roundabout way, but what was the point? After all, these Satanists treated me well and had given me a second chance. Since the Church of Lucifer's Peace Center was to be set up in my world, I knew my way around. I decided to set it up near the St. Joseph Center. All those poor souls who weren't allowed in there because they weren't clean would get a chance with us. Everyone who stayed with us also received flyers about Lucifer's church and had the chance to work for him. If I saw great potential in someone, I would refer them to Lucas. If someone became uncomfortable, like the religious activists who had something against Lucifer's church and regularly protested outside the center, I was to send them down the special elevator. They'd be taken care of there, Lucas always said with a smile. I knew what he meant, and that's why I never used the elevator. I prefer to help people, and that's what I did. We let him spend the night here, handed out flyers, gave out food, and hired people to spread the word of the devil. Yes, we've made something of ourselves, Steve said in my head. Yes, we have. I didn't think we could, I replied. It was 6 months after we opened when someone looking for a place to stay came in that I somehow recognized. I asked my colleague Hilda what the man's name was. He was registered with us as Mr. Presley, sir. He told me his business went bankrupt and his wife kicked him out because he's a drunk, Hilda replied. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Mr. Presley from the Peacock Burger Shop. I remember how he first gave me the hope of a job interview only to insult me and throw me out. He called me a monkey and a bum. That was the worst day of my life. I started shaking. It's him, Steve. It's Mr. Presley, I said in my head. Yes, I know. I could never forget that scumbag, replied Steve. What do we do now? What did he do when we needed his help? We can't send him away. Send him away? I want to kill him. No, I can't do that, I said and went over to Mr. Presley. Hello, Mr. Presley. I'm sorry that things didn't go well for you. Why don't you accompany me to my office and we can discuss how I can help you? Thanks, that's nice, Presley said, wiping some snot off his nose. We went to the elevator and the up button was pressed. Presley seemed pleased that someone was offering him help. Do you know who I am, Mr. Presley? What do you mean, he asked. The doors opened again. My name's Eddie. Eddie, without a 4. I can spell it for you. Eddie. Steve, Eddie. And Steve gave the poor man a kick. He fell out of the elevator into the dark basement, where the undead immediately pounced on him. They bit off his fingers as he tried to protect himself with his hands, ripped out one of his arms and bit him in the stomach, neck, and face. He screamed terribly, and Steve enjoyed it. Look at that! It looks so old! Wow, do you think that box belonged to Grandpa? The old dusty box was big, so big that 7-year-old Noah would easily fit in it. I don't know. Let's find out. Wait, we just can't open the box. What if there's adult stuff inside? So what? I'm 11 years old, Noah. This is like being an adult, almost. If you're scared, just go downstairs and help Mommy unpack. But Noah didn't want to go. The attic of their new house was full of surprises and exciting old things. And somehow, this box looked like the ones pirates used to keep all their treasures in. So after he stopped protesting, his older brother opened the box. The boys were disappointed to see only a bunch of old newspapers and other boring stuff. Oh man, what a mess, said Noah, already turning his attention back to the other things. Wait, here are some photos. Look how old they are, said Lucas. They look like they're 100 years old. Who is that man? Is that Grandpa? Lucas wasn't so sure about that. The man in the photo didn't look like his grandpa, who died 2 years ago, but he was standing in front of the very house they now lived in and where their grandparents had lived before. That must be his father, so our great-great-grandpa. Wow, the little brother was impressed. There's another picture of him. I think he's standing in front of the old hospital. That's not far from here. Looks like he worked there. Maybe he was a doctor or an orderly. "What else is in the box?" Noah asked impatiently after using his inhaler. It was quite dusty in the attic. The brothers kept rummaging around in the old box but found no more pictures. Lucas wondered why his grandfather had kept all those newspaper articles and started reading them while Noah kept looking for pictures. All these articles, they're about missing patients from the hospital and about the closure of the C wing at the hospital because of various incidents. Noah's eyes suddenly grew wide. Wow, who cares about the stupid patients? Look what I found! Is that gold? The small piece of metal actually looked like gold, and Lucas became jealous. "Give it to me. I'll take a look at it." "No, that's mine. Find one yourself." That was actually a good idea. If there was a piece of gold in the box, maybe there was more. Lucas searched frantically in the box, and when his little brother realized why he was doing it, he joined in. But they were unlucky. There was no gold left. Instead, Lucas turned his attention to something else. A piece of paper with a sketch he had painted on a building. Or part of a building. There was a line leading somewhere. It looked like a treasure map. There was an X at the end of the line. Next to it was written, "Door. Knock here." That was strange because the X was in the middle of a room. How could there be a door? "Lucas, look. That's weird. I'm not sure I'm getting it right, but..." The older of the brothers looked at what Noah had found. A small piece of paper that said, "Shopping list. 50 to 100 nails. 100 milliliters of penicillin. 1 heart patient. Doesn't matter what the condition is, but has to be a heart patient. Need it by Wednesday. Pay gold or diamonds, whatever you want. See ya." A friendly smiley face was painted next to it. Lucas got an uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. Had his great-grandfather actually sold patients for gold? No, that couldn't be. But then there was the gold Noah had found. Maybe he'd just gotten the medicine and nails. That had to be it. "Lucas, I'm not comfortable with this. Let's put the box away again. You can have the gold, too." "Are you stupid? This is a great opportunity. If this business that man was running still exists, maybe we can earn some gold or diamonds, too." "What are you talking about? We can't kidnap people." "Of course we can't. But we can get him nails, maybe medicine, and whatever else he needs. We have a plan, and we know where to find him. Or his successor." "I don't like this, Lucas. I don't like this." "Think about it. If we just make a little gold, we can help Mom pay the bills for Grandma in the old folks' home. Or do you want her to cry again like she did the other day?" "Well, we can go and see if anyone else from the shop is around, but only for a short while." To find out if the gold was even real, they gave it to their mother and said they had found it in the attic. They did not mention what else they had found. In fact, it was pure gold and worth almost $500. Their mother told them when she came back from the jeweler. Lucas looked over at Noah and nodded proudly. His little brother urged him to tell their mother where the gold came from, but Lucas managed to persuade him not to. They were the men in the house and had to take care of her, he said. Now that the authenticity of the gold was confirmed, there was no way around visiting the place marked on the treasure map. The next day they went together to the old hospital. A large fence with barbed wire had been drawn around the whole area. However, the brothers did not have to look for long before they found a hole through which they could slip. There were quite a few of them. They must have been teenagers who wanted to party in the abandoned building. They were both a little excited and maybe scared, but curiosity prevailed. The front door had been broken open years ago, so they had no problem getting into the building itself, and inside it was a bit gloomy and smelled musty. However, the signs were easy to read, and they found the C wing without any problems. Here, However, the large double door was locked and sealed with several thick steel chains. That meant they needed another way. Noah already wanted to go home, but Lucas wasn't ready to give up yet. They went out again and found a window that had been smashed. After climbing back in, they saw the locked door again, only this time from the other side. So they were in C-Wing. Perfect. Lucas took the treasure map out of his pocket and they both followed the line leading to the X. The corridor and the rooms in the C-Wing smelled even worse than the rest of the hospital, and everything looked much older. Strange plants were growing in many places, and some walls were quite wet. "This is it. This is the room," said Lucas. "Okay, great. Let's go home now." "We're just going to check," you said. "Yeah, check. Have we looked yet, stupid? No. So let's go in there and look for the door. Then we can go home." When they opened the door to the room, the rest was easy. The X, what was marked on the treasure map, was also here, big on the floor, pretty much in the middle of the room. The brothers stood right on it. But there was no door to be seen nearby, only wooden wheelchairs. "There's no door here and no businessman. Let's go, please, Lucas." "He wrote you have to knock," whispered the older of the two. And that's what he did. He just tapped in the air and felt pretty stupid about it. Strangely, knocking on the air made the same sound as knocking on a wooden door. "What was that, Lucas?" Noah asked anxiously. "Come in," a voice said. The brothers fell forward and landed on the floor, but it wasn't the floor of the old hospital. It was clean and made of large blocks of stone, like in an old castle. And so did the rest of the room they were now in. Old paintings, tapestries, candles, and on the wall was a large old desk. On it was a candle, a quill, some ink, and a smartphone? The man sitting at the desk looked over at the children, a little surprised. "Where is Gilbert? Is he sick?" asked the man. The brothers couldn't get a word out. Was this the man who had given their great-grandpa Gilbert all that gold? "Do you speak this language? Habla español? Aratak?" Yes, we speak that language," said Noah boldly. "Wonderful. So, what about Gilbert?" "He died. About 30 years ago, I think," replied Lucas. "Oh, I hate time. It's so fragile sometimes. So if Gilbert is dead, you both knew him, and now you've knocked on my door. What am I to make of that?" We thought that since our great-grandfather is dead, could we help you out a little?" said Lucas. "Oh, I see. You found out Gilbert made a lot of money, and now you want a piece of the pie, am I right?" "Who are you? Have you been hurting people?" "Noah." "Noah? What a pretty name." "No, Noah, I don't hurt people. I experiment. I'm a scientist, and I make medicine. But I don't just want to cure any disease. I want to cure all diseases in every world. I hate it when people suffer. I just want peace. I'm the man of peace, I guess." "Man of peace? Can we help you with your experiments?" asked Lucas. "How kind of you. While you're here, let's find out if you have what it takes. Let me think. Bring me your mother's very favorite dress, the one she loves the most." How will that help you with the experiments?" Noah asked. "Bring me what I ask if you want to get paid. If you don't come back with the dress, you don't have to come back at all. Now, shoo, off with you." The man of peace made a gesture with his hands that they should leave, and they fell backwards onto the floor of the C-Wing in the hospital. Both of them had to process what they had experienced and didn't speak the whole way home. Only when they were back in Lucas's room did they start discussing what they were going to do now. Lucas was happy about the comparatively easy task they had been given, while Noah thought stealing from his mother was wrong. Lucas finally won the discussion because he told Noah they would exchange her dress for gold just for her and that she could buy many more dresses with it. So they sneaked into their mother's bedroom. It wasn't hard to choose which was her favorite dress. The red summer dress with the sunflowers on it she called terribly kitschy, but she had got it from her grandpa before he died. While they were stuffing it into the backpack, Noah had to use his inhaler several times. He was incredibly excited. The next day, they went back to the sea wing of the old hospital and knocked on the invisible door of the Man of Peace. "Come in!" This time they were prepared and landed on their feet. "Bravo! You boys are learning fast. What do you have for me?" Lucas grabbed the dress from his backpack and brought it over to the Man of Peace. Now that he was standing right next to him, he could get a closer look at him. Actually, he looked quite normal. A gaunt face, dark hair combed back, and green eyes. On his black robe, which looked like that of a priest, he had a pin. On it was a simple smiley face. Around it were the words, "Team Peace." "What do you need the dress for, Mr. Peace?" Noah asked. "Oh, I don't need it at all, little man. I was just testing you guys. If you're going to work for me, I need to know you're willing to do whatever I ask. Stealing from your own mother is something most kids wouldn't do, but you two did. And from now on, you may really work for me. The things I need may seem a little strange to you at first, but it's for a good cause. So, you're on my team now. You are very welcome. I'm afraid I'm out of t-shirts, but I should have some pins. A small moment." He opened the drawer at his desk, rummaged around in it a bit, and finally found 2 pins, which he handed to the boys. They looked exactly like the one he was wearing himself, with his hands like he told them to put the pins on after all, and they did. "You look great. Well, here's your payment. Next time there'll be considerably more." He flicked a small piece of gold over and Lucas caught it. He was so proud. "But now, back to work. I need nails. 50 to 100 of them. And a heart patient. Tomorrow would be good. Now, go." Again, he made a gesture with his hands and the brothers fell backwards. This time they landed on their butts. "A heart patient? Did you hear that, Lucas? He wants us to kidnap people." "He's just trying to help them. I'm sure they'll benefit from his experiments." "Are you crazy? Look what he gave us for pins. This man is totally nuts, and if we come back here again, so are we. Please promise me we'll never come back here. Please promise." "All right, I promise." Around noon the next day, Lucas knocked energetically and excitingly on his neighbor, Miss Schran's door. Hello, Lucas. Miss Schran, you have to help me. My brother, we were playing in that old hospital over there and he got hurt. He's kind of stuck. Can you help me, please?" "Oh dear, of course. I'll call the police right away. Or would an ambulance perhaps be more appropriate?" No, neither of them. He's not badly hurt either. If you call the police, my mother will know what we did and we'll be in so much trouble. Please, just come with me for a minute." The kindly old lady didn't want to get the boys in trouble, so she went with Lucas for now. A hole in the fence had been enlarged so that even an adult could fit through it without having to bend down too much. "Lucas, I'm a bit old for this. Maybe we should call the police after all. What do you think?" "Please, Miss Schran, we're almost there. Please, don't get us in trouble." They went through the main entrance and out the door to Sea Wing. The chains were now beside the door. "He's right over here." He led Mrs. Schran straight to the X on the floor. Where is he, Noah?" Lucas knocked on the invisible door. "Come in." The boy landed on his feet, but the old lady just fell on the floor, breaking her nose, which started to bleed. Ouch! Oh no. Lucas, where are we? What is this place? Where's Noah? Hello, ma'am. It's a pleasure to welcome you here. Little Lucas here is concerned about your health condition. That's why he took you to the best heart specialist in the whole multiverse. Oh, I thought the hospital closed a long time ago. Is this even the hospital? Don't worry about those unimportant details. Festus, my head nurse, will escort you to your room. A tall, exceedingly muscular man, probably Festus, entered the room. He wore a nurse's outfit that was far too small. His skin was strangely greenish and pale, and on his head he wore a paper bag with a smiley face painted on it. And of course he wore the badge that Lucas wore too. What? No, let me go! Lucas, run! This man is crazy! Run and get help! Help is already here, Miss Schran. Don't be afraid. You'll be fine, replied Lucas coolly. While Festus carried the screaming lady on his shoulder outside, Lucas took the nails out of his backpack and put them on the desk. That was great work, Lucas. You work even faster than Gilbert. I like you. I can maybe even see a bigger role for you on my team. The next thing I need is a lung patient. No special disease. I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, and don't forget your payment. This time it was a diamond. A big one, in fact. But Lucas was not happy when he arrived back at the hospital. Was he feeling guilty? He wasn't sure. Mrs. Schran really only wanted to help him, and he had lied to her. Later that night, when he couldn't sleep, he woke up his brother. Lucas, what time is it? Noah, I have to tell you something. I did something bad. I went back to him. Why? What did you bring him? Mrs. Schran. Are you kidding me? How did you even do that? Are you crazy? I know it was wrong. We have to help her. I know where she is. We can get her out of there and then destroy the X on the floor so no one will ever find him again. Please, help me. I don't want to go back there, especially not in the dark. But Mrs. Schran is there. We have to help her, and if I go alone, I won't make it. He'll find me and kill me. Noah didn't want his brother to die, so he went along. They went through the hole in the fence and through the door that was once locked with chains. Okay, I know he's not around at night, so just be quiet, okay? Okay. Lucas knocked on the door. Nothing happened for a few seconds. Then suddenly the brothers fell forward and landed back on their feet. When they looked up, they saw the man of peace. He looked confused. What are you boys doing here? It must be the middle of the night over there. Are you going to throw down? I don't like quitters. The man of peace sounded angry. Noah panicked. We're sorry, Mr. Peace. We didn't mean to disturb you. We just wanted... Yes, we wanted to... It's after midnight. So I would argue that you can call it morning after all. What are you talking about, boy? Asked the man of peace, who was now even more confused. Well, I'm bringing you your lung patient. Bronchial asthma. You said no specific disease, said Lucas emotionlessly. Lucas, what did you do? Lung patient, what did you do? Noah started to cry. Oh, don't worry, little Noah. Festus will take care of you. And Lucas. Wow. Festus came in and gently grabbed little Noah, who wasn't even struggling, on the shoulder. Festus really was a caring head nurse. Lucas, you can't leave me here. I hate you. I hate you. Festus, take him straight to treatment room 4, please, and get me those nails. 50 to 100. The head nurse nodded and closed the door behind her. Lucas, I'm so proud of you. We need to talk about your career. You can get bigger diamonds. You can even have your own room here. Oh, and of course you get a t-shirt too. There's a bright future ahead of us. Let's talk. My grandmother was always a loving and caring person. Well, at least until she came back from that hiking trip she took with the senior center. After that, she cursed all the time, got mad at me, and forgot a whole lot. Sometimes she just forgot, what day of the week it was, but more and more often, she didn't know who I was or who she was herself. I was lucky that on one of her good days, I was able to persuade her to go with me to her doctor. Dr. Marvez diagnosed her with advanced dementia and advised her to move to a nursing home or some other facility because soon I would not be able to take good enough care of her. And how he was proved right. I thanked him, but didn't tell him that we couldn't afford a place in a nursing home. We could barely pay for our small flat. My grandmother had practically no income at all, and what I earned delivering pizzas wasn't the world either. There were no other family members who could help us. They were already dead or left us years ago. Damn drugs. And so it was up to me to do my best to take care of my grandmother, even if it wasn't easy. This woman had raised me when my drug-addicted mother could not. I owed her that. I made some soup. Grandma, are you hungry? Hungry? Yes, thank you, good man. She must have thought I was her waiter. She sat in her favorite armchair, and I brought her the soup on a tray. Thank you very much. I don't have any money with me, but my husband will tip you in a minute. Sure thing. Thank you very much, lady. I read on the internet that sometimes it's best to just play along. It was easier that way for the sufferers, and also for us relatives. Instead of eating the soup, she just stared at it for a few minutes. Then a fly sat down on the edge of the plate and flew away shortly afterwards. That had somehow caught her attention. She followed the fly with her eyes, which was more interested in her soup than she was. Finally, it sat down again at the edge of the plate and probably wanted to eat its fill of the soup. But it didn't happen because Grandma grabbed the fly with lightning speed and precision and stuffed it in her mouth. It was disgusting to watch, but at least she got some protein. About a week after she ate a fly for the first time, things got really strange. I woke up in the middle of the night because the neighbors were fighting again, or beating each other up, who knows. If I was going to be awake, I thought I might as well have a sip of milk, so I walked over to the tiny kitchen. I know you don't do this, especially if you don't live alone, but I just drank from the carton instead of grabbing a glass. While I was drinking, I looked around the kitchen a bit, and thanks to the moonlight, I could see that something was sitting on the table. I spat out the milk and almost had a heart attack when I saw it was my grandma. She was just sitting there, arms wrapped around her knees, and smiling. Her mouth was so wide open that her smile no longer looked human, and she didn't move an inch. Not a muscle twitched. She didn't even blink. "Oh, Grandma, please go back to bed. You can't stay here all night." Slowly, she turned her head in my direction, staring me straight in the eye now, still with that inhuman grin. I sprinted out of the kitchen, into my room, and closed the door behind me, the milk carton still in my hand. I knew it was childish. The poor woman was just sick. But that wide-open mouth scared the hell out of me. I didn't come out of my room until it was really light, which was around 10 o'clock, and then only because I had to pee so badly. Slowly and very carefully, I looked around the corner into the kitchen and was very relieved when I saw that Grandma was no longer sitting on the table. After I'd gone to the toilet, I looked to see where Grandma was. I found her in bed. Judging by the smell, she had messed herself. I cleaned her and her bed. The rest of the day, she was as lethargic as usual. She seemed to have no memory of what had happened last night. Nothing strange happened over the next few days. Well, it was more the things that didn't happen that made my fear of her grow and grow. For example, she stopped eating completely. Sometimes she would stare into space for hours without blinking. Not blinking once. At some point, I also stopped talking to her. I was too afraid of a reaction. I might not like it. 8 days after our meeting in the kitchen, things finally got out of hand. We were in the small living room watching TV when she started making strange clicking noises with her mouth. The noises sounded so inhuman, I didn't even know how she was making them. My fear of her gave way to somewhat a greater fear that she might have a stroke and die. I went over to her and grabbed her shoulder to see if she was okay. She jerked her head toward me and stared at me with eyes that somehow no longer looked human. It looked as if there were several small pairs of eyes hidden in her eyes. I was so scared and confused that I couldn't defend myself when she bit my arm. The bite was really deep and hurt like hell. Panic-stricken, I tried to free my arm, but her jaw had really dug into my forearm and I couldn't get it free. It was necessary to hit her in the face with my fist to free myself. Another thing I was not very proud of. After that day, the thought of just running away and starting over on my own was constantly in my mind. I had no money for a clinic or a nursing home, and I wasn't even sure she belonged there anymore, so I had to leave her here. For about 2 days after the bite, I had a high fever and felt absolutely drained. I hoarded water bottles in my room and locked the door. Only when I really had to go to the toilet urgently did I go out. That's how scared I was. During those 2 days, I didn't see or hear her. When I finally felt a little better, I packed my backpack, just in case I needed it, and my goodness, I was going to need it very soon. After packing it, I thought it would be best to see if my grandmother was still alive. Her door was closed. Cautiously, I opened it and looked into the room. I couldn't see anything because the light was off and the windows must have been covered with excrement. But through the light coming in through the open door, I saw something. In the corner where her bed was, there was now a large... I don't know what it was. The closest thing I could have called it was a cocoon. As I pointed my smartphone at the structure of cobwebs to see it better, I saw 6 little eyes staring directly into my own. I ran out of the room, pounded the door shut, and grabbed my backpack. Even when I was already on the street and running toward the bus stop, I kept looking over my shoulder every few seconds. I took the bus to the next town and rented a shabby hotel room there. That was all I could afford. It was a week before I regretted my decision. This was the woman who had raised me, and she was still in that flat. What if it wasn't her that was changing, but something inside her that was changing her? Something that had been slowly eating away at her brain since she'd been on that walk. I decided to go back and put her out of her misery, because she didn't deserve such a life. When I arrived, I carefully opened the door, which was unlocked. She was not in the hallway, nor in the kitchen, nor in my room or the bathroom or the living room. I knew what that meant. I opened the door to her room and held the large torch pointed at the place where the cocoon had been a week ago. What I saw there was even more disturbing than what I saw the last time. The cocoon was open, and in front of it, and next to it, was slime and skin, I guess. Whatever came out of that cocoon, and it wasn't my grandmother, it was gone. I wanted to go back to the hotel, but I'd forgotten where it was. I've been forgetting a lot of things lately, and my arm hurts so much. Did something bite me?
I'd been working in forensics for many years, but I'd never seen anything like this before. It started out like a normal weekend. Friday was relatively quiet, and I had time to get angry and sad about how many young people had landed on my table lately. Here in New Canton, we've been struggling with poverty, gangs, and a high crime rate among young people. They get into shootings, drug deals, and prostitution as young as 14. Even at that age, they see no other way out but crime. We need to work harder in New Canton to show kids a future that's better than having a bullet in their chest at 15. As I was packing my bag to go home, Detective Kumar came by and was probably happy to catch me. "Hey, Richard, you weren't just leaving, were you?" the detective asked. Me? For the weekend? No way. What have you got for me, Ranjit? I asked. Thank you, my friend. Do you know who we finally busted? The drug kingpin of the Albaz cartel. We found this young woman in his cellar who's about to come in. She was dead, but we don't know what killed her. We had Nayla on the screen, but she said you're going to have to open her up to find anything. If we can still get him for murder, that would be a real breakthrough, he said excitedly. Then I can't help but hang out for another hour or two. The lasagna I'm putting in the microwave can wait, I replied. Thank you very much. Call me when you have something. I will. Shortly afterwards, my colleagues wheeled the young lady in, and, as always, I greeted her politely. Just because they were dead didn't mean you had to be rude to people. Nayla, my colleague, was right. There really was no external influence to be found. As coroners, it was our job to find out 4 things. First was the cause of death. This could be a blow with a blunt object, drowning, or a heart attack. Secondly, we had to clarify the manner of death. In other words, whether the person died a natural or unnatural death. Sometimes, as in this case, it's also necessary to establish the identity of the victim. We can often do this using the teeth. Another important factor of the investigations is, of course, the time of death, which we can determine from the temperature of the body, the degree of decomposition, and other factors. After I'd carried out the usual examinations, I started the Y-cut. I folded the woman's left and right to the side and took a step back. Her insides didn't look like those of a human being. At least not that of a healthy person. Her lungs and windpipe had completely collapsed and were barely visible. Instead, her esophagus was swollen to twice its size, and her heart was almost as big as a handball. What was even stranger was the greenish glow in some parts of her peritoneum. Whatever was going on with this woman, it was something sick. I had to take a look closer at the heart and probably send it to the lab. I couldn't avoid sawing open her rib cage, so I took the small circular saw from my workbench and exposed her heart. When I cut the blood vessels leading to and from the heart to take it out, not only was there blood dripping out, but also a smelly green liquid. Damn! Detective Kumar wouldn't believe what I found on the phone. As I put the heart in a plastic box, I noticed something on her stomach. Someone had carved a few letters on it. I took a closer look and read the following. Model 388 Mother. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I put the heart over to the samples I was going to send in and sat down at my laptop to take notes. I thought about the 6 stories I'd heard from the north. Supposedly, there were a few cases of walking corpses and people suffering from terrible mutations. The government blamed it on the bath salts drug and conspiracy theories from the internet, but I could worry about the latter. Now, I would continue working to finally get home. I turned around again and couldn't believe my eyes. The young woman had a bloated lower abdomen. She almost looked like she was heavily pregnant. I couldn't help but think of the name carved on her belly, Mother. At first the sight frightened me, but then I came to my senses. There were several chemicals that could trigger such a process after death. Now it was up to me to find out which one it was, but I didn't get around to it at first. I had heard something. Was it a throbbing? Confused, I looked at the samples, more precisely to be looking at the transparent container with the woman's heart in it, beating again. How could that be? Well, there were drugs that could cause a muscle to twitch even after death, and our heart was a kind of muscle after all, but somehow it didn't look like it. At first, it was just a throbbing. Then it started to move more violently. I'd never experienced anything like it in my whole career. The heart moved so violently that the container slid back and forth on the table. Then the organ tore open at one point and dozens of little spiders crawled out of the heart along with the green liquid. Whatever was going on here, it was definitely beyond my expertise. Maybe there was a connection to the undead and the mutated humans after all. If so, we had to call the FBI immediately. Since I didn't want to decide that on my own, I called Rankin. Hey, "Yeah, have you found anything?" he asked. "Oh man, you wouldn't believe what I found. It's sick and I can't describe it to you on the phone. Why don't you come back down and see for yourself?" "I will, hang on. There's something going on. I'll be right with you," Detective Kumar said and hung up. As soon as he was down here, I would feel better too. I wasn't hungry for lasagna anymore. My mind was finally blown when I saw the young woman's body suddenly standing in front of me. I couldn't see any life in her eyes. She looked as dead as before, but she was standing about 2 meters away from me. That was a fact. Two voices were now fighting with each other in my head. One told me that I could explain all of this with heavy drugs that were probably tried on her, and they were now innervating her nerves. The other voice told me that I could forget all that crap I'd learned in medical school because this wasn't medicine. This was something evil. All our fears were true. There were undead, vampires, and demons. The darkness had come, and now it was shattering my reality. But the medic in me was able to gain the upper hand. Through her open torso, I could see something rising from her stomach and being pushed into her gullet. Shots rang out above me in the police station, but I could only hear them distantly. The mother sprayed a disgusting green liquid into my face from her mouth, smelling of pus and stomach acid. I got a lot of it in my eyes and mouth. At first I felt the urge to throw up, but then it disappeared. My vision was blurred, and I was also thinking in a blur. Instead of wanting to throw up or call Kumar, I wanted one thing. I wanted to eat. And I wanted to hear the man's voice. I was changing. My heart stopped beating. The mother had given birth to me. Now I have to stop. The man of peace is calling for me. Since the news has been full of reports about this sickness that has broken out, alleged monsters and weird spiders running around and governments collapsing, I've been worried. So far, our country's been spared, and supposedly nothing and nobody is crossing the border, but I don't trust the suits. Sooner or later, everything will go down the drain here, too, so I had a plan. Buy supplies, a few guns, ammunition, and a small hut in the mountains. Then I couldn't give a single F what those spiders and the undead did to the fools here. I just needed a little cash. A few thousand should be enough, and thanks to a documentary on YouTube, I know where to get it. I'm going to sell my lady on the deep web. She was useless anyway. She couldn't cook. She was no good in bed, and she was always crying. She needed a daily thrashing with the belt so that she would finally shut up. The instructions on how to get into the dark web were pretty easy to understand. I only needed 1 day, and I had access to the darkest corners of the internet. Even for a hearted guy like myself, it was intense to see what was offered on various sites. You can even order human flesh. For a whole lot of money, of course. If you wanted to, you can even order a guy to come to your house and eat a part of you, a foot or an arm. Oh, what sick stuff. Thanks to the documentary, I already knew the name of the site I was looking for, and I quickly found it. Here, you could now post your own auction. It was pretty simple, like on eBay. You had to enter the exact measurements, gender, hair color, and age of the person, and then wait for offers. I came into the kitchen after posting the offer because it was like 6:01 p.m., time for dinner. I couldn't believe the food wasn't on the table yet. The old lady was still in the kitchen. I was starting to get fed up. I went to her without saying anything. She was just about to come up with some excuse when I grabbed her hand and plunged it into the pot of boiling water and spaghetti. She screamed and moaned until I smacked her. Then I went out to get a burger. The pot and all the spaghetti were on the floor when I left, and I really hoped for her sake that mess would be cleaned up when I got home, and indeed, everything was tidy. I only saw that out of the corner of my eye because I went straight to my study. I was overcome with curiosity to see if anyone had responded to my offer yet. I booted up my laptop and logged in. The latest bid immediately caught my eye. Mr. Peace 69 offered me $20,000 for the old lady. That was crazy. Fortunately, I had the option of accepting the bid immediately instead of waiting for the auction to end. I was now $20,000 richer, baby. In the checkout process, I wrote that I would like the money in cash and asked the buyer for a suitable drop-off location. I was told to come to a disused quarry about 50 miles from here tomorrow evening at 10 p.m. To be on the safe side, I looked at the route beforehand and saw that I could easily reach the quarry via remote country roads. That was perfect. When the time came the next evening, my adrenaline rose dramatically. I had done things that were against the law before, but nothing like this. Marie, that was the old lady's name, didn't suspect a thing. Without warning, I punched her in her pretty young face and tied her up. To stop her screaming, I stuffed my worn underwear into her mouth. Then I heaved her into the back of my old Ford Ranger and covered her with a tarp. The journey was quiet. I didn't even meet another driver on the way. The quarry was also deserted, and I drove slowly down the winding road. Now, the others, well, they were over a half hour late, but what the hell? I'm happy to wait 30 minutes for $20,000, right? I was a little surprised that they only came in a small car. There was a guy with a hood at the wheel, a huge guy with a paper bag on his head squeezed out of the small car. He was wearing a sweater and something like a nurse's costume underneath. I don't know if this was a sick game for him or if it was customary for people to dress up for these kind of handovers, but the muscle man came over to me and threw a doctor's bag at my feet. He wore a little badge on his nurse outfit that had a smiley face on it, and it said, Team Peace. I could see in the spotlight that the bag was filled with the bundles of money. My heart was pounding with joy. As the huge nurse didn't say anything, I took off the top and pointed at Marie, who seemed panicked. From the look of those guys, she should be too. Surprisingly gentle, he grabbed her shoulder, ran over with her, and took off her restraints. As I quickly got into my car and drove away, I could see the woman sitting down in the back seat. Well, I wished her a lot of fun. Over the next few days, I started to buy my supplies. I was just about to pack all the tinned food into a box when there was a knock at the door. That made me a little uneasy. Normally, there was never a knock at my door. Luckily, I already got myself a Glock 29 ready for action, which I pulled out as I went to the door. I opened it and saw Marie lying in front of my door. There was no one else to be seen. At first, I thought she was dead. But then I noticed that her chest was rising and falling. But her eyes, they seemed so fixed. I dragged the damn woman inside. We didn't have any direct neighbors, but nobody had to notice. She didn't make a sound. Somehow, she was drugged. Damn. Our government and our legal system was still intact, so I couldn't give her the chance to speak to anyone. Without much thought, I loaded her butt into the big basement. I had no idea what to do with her. I don't know why, but I put some bread and a bottle of water next to her. Maybe I was feeling guilty. I checked on her the next day. She hadn't touched the bread and the water, but she was more alert now. She was sitting against the wall and eating something. As the light was broken, I had to get my flashlight. When the beam of light hit her, I saw that she had a rat and was eating it. She just bit into its back and ripped muscles, tendons, and even parts of the spine out of the poor animal with her mouth. The blood was spurting. I couldn't watch. I went back upstairs and locked the door again. Over the next 2 days, I thought about what I should do with her. Over and over again, I could only think of one solution. I had to end her. Even though I had repeatedly beaten, humiliated, and perhaps tortured her over the last few years, I felt sorry for her now. Seeing what she had become made me feel guilty, and I didn't need that right now. So I took my Glock and went down to the cellar with my flashlight. Her body would probably never be found. When the apocalypse breaks out here in the country in a few weeks, no one will have time to look for her. Poor thing. It smelled awful in the cellar. It must be a rotting rat. It was no longer the place where Marie had been sitting before. Maybe she was hiding from me. There were a few water containers in the back corner. There was enough room for her to hide behind them. I walked slowly and carefully to the crates and around them. I didn't find Marie there, but parts of her. Her long blonde hair was everywhere, her teeth, blood and fingernails. What the hell had happened to her? When I heard the loud breathing behind me, I remembered something. That's exactly how it started in the other places, like they said in the news. Relatives changed, withdrew. At some point, a cocoon was found that was empty because the spider was already on the hunt for prey. But there was no cocoon here. I slowly turned around and looked into her hungry, huge brown eyes. She was no spider. She was something else. With the long snout, pointed teeth, and powerful paws, she looked like a wolf. Her naked body was no longer as pretty as it used to be. She had that bristly black hair all over her. As quickly as I could, I raised my gun and fired, but she knocked it out of my hand with her paw. Then she grabbed me and bit my neck. Then she bit my face. I could smell her stinking breath as she tore my cheeks apart. She also tore my stomach and chest apart with her claws. I could even see my intestines. But then she stopped as if it was some kind of instinct. She looked down at me and left the cellar. She was going to go hunting. I knew that now. I thought I was going to die now, but I didn't. I was just changing. It hurt so much. As I'm writing this, I start to hear the voice of the man inside my head. So be warned, these creatures are coming, and they come for you. My life was simple, humble, and boring. But that all changed when I drank this strange stuff for the first time and met the man of peace. On the Tuesday that everything changed, my day actually started pretty normal. My mom managed to wake me up on the fourth try. I washed up, got dressed, and ran for the bus. Now that I'd started my apprenticeship as a bakery sales assistant, it was no longer fun to be late, as it had been at school recently. Well, I wasn't completely out of school yet. After all, I had to go to vocational school twice a week. That was just as exhausting for me as going to secondary school. I just didn't get along with other people, especially young people. They were loud, went to parties, and constantly had to make a name for themselves. I would probably be described as introverted. I preferred to have my peace and quiet and read a book by King, Lovecraft, or Tolkien at home. There, I could immerse myself in the craziest adventures without having to go out myself. I didn't fare much better at work. After all, I had to serve people for most of the day who also complained to me about the increased prices for bread and rolls. They acted as if the money was going straight into my pocket. It was always a relief when I was allowed to go to the back to clear out the oven or do some cleaning. After all, a broom or a cleaning rag didn't get on my nerves with its waffling. When I finally got off work at 6 p.m., I put on my headphones and made my way to the bus. When I got home, I found a parcel on the doorstep. I assumed it was from my father or mother, but they said they hadn't ordered anything. When I looked again, I noticed that my name was in the top corner. Julius. No surname, no address. Well, then it hadn't come by post. Someone must have left it outside on the doorstep. That was kind of strange. Nevertheless, I took it upstairs to the attic, which served as my room. I opened the parcel and saw a pile of small bags. My first thought was that someone had sent me drugs, but that wasn't true. There were animals on the small, colorful bags. An eagle, a shark, a tiger, and a cobra. Apparently, they were different types of energy drinks. I didn't know who'd brought them to me, but it was just what I needed. I was planning to stay up late today, and after a hard day's work, that wasn't easy. I got myself a glass of cold water from downstairs, and then I had to decide. Tropical, raspberry, strawberry, or citrus. I decided on strawberry, poured the bag into my glass, and stirred vigorously with a fork. Then I sat down in front of my PC, switched on some fantasy music, and read one of my books. When I took my first sip, I was really surprised. I often drink energy drinks, but they didn't taste as damn good as this one. But there was more to it than that. It wasn't just the good taste. I felt something inside me. Was it a kind of, vibration? Could be. It certainly felt good. It was probably around 3 a.m. when I fell asleep. But Was I even asleep? Was I dreaming? What was happening to me? I had the feeling that I was falling. I was falling and falling through darkness and cosmic corridors and the essence of the universe. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a long corridor with a few cells. A guy who looked like a housemaster had given me a few friendly slaps. Hey, you can't sleep here. How'd you get in here? The man asked me. What? I don't know. I don't know. Who are you? I wanted to know. You can call me Mr. Richards. I'm the janitor here. Are you one of the test persons? Then you have to go back to your room. Test person? No, I'm not. I've never been here before. Where are we anyway? I asked. Apparently, Mr. Richards wasn't so sure himself. This was probably a facility that wasn't open to everyone. But then how the hell did I get in here? As Mr. Richards wasn't sure how to proceed, he took me by the hand and took me to the head of the facility. He was still busy with a boy called Jake, but then he had time for me. He was wearing a black shirt, he had slicked back black hair and green eyes that almost seemed to glow, and on his shirt he wore a badge with a smiley face and the words, Team Peace. A young man who appeared out of nowhere in my testing facility. How should I understand your intrusion here? He asked. Hey! I'm sorry, sir. I fell asleep in front of my computer and woke up here in the hallway. I really don't know how that happened. I felt a vibration when I fell asleep, and then I fell. At least I think so. I told him. That's interesting, he said. So you're a nocturnal wanderer. That's rare. It happened to me when I was a kid. I could use someone with your skills. Would you like to work for me? Asked the man with the green eyes. Well, I replied, actually, I already have a job as a bakery salesman, sir. What would I do in your company? What would you do? You would travel, experience adventures, visit foreign worlds, complete important assignments. I've been very involved in my work for a long time now, and my schedule is full, so I don't get to travel much anymore. There are still so many worlds to discover. You could take notes and videos on your night trips. Will you take me up on the offer? He wanted to know. To be honest, I still felt like I was dreaming, so there was no harm in accepting his offer. I'm in, sir, I said proudly. Excellent. What's your name? My name is Julius, sir. Julius, welcome to Team Peace. I am the man of peace. Here, I have a badge for you. Oh, and give me your phone for a moment, said the man of peace. He handed me the badge and I gave him my phone. He connected it to his and seemed to be installing some kind of app. With the official Team Peace app, you can register the worlds you visit. It also shows you what time you're in, which is important. These corridors, these hallways, not only lead you through space, but also through time. As a nocturnal wanderer, it is always an advantage to know where and when you are. If you press the Peace button, you can make a red dot appear that will lead you into the facility here, said the man of peace, and he gave me back my cell phone. I had understood that much. Then my dream ended because the vibrations started again. The man of peace blurred before my eyes, and I suddenly heard my alarm clock ring. I was still sitting in front of my PC, which I had been on all night. What kind of sick dream had that been? It seemed so real to me. Wait a minute. What was that in my hand? It was the Team Peace badge. Are you saying it was all real? Was I actually in this facility last night and joined Team Peace? How did that happen? Was that the energy drink I'd been drinking? I don't know, but I had to find out later because now I had to get to my other job, to my stupid job at the bakery. But what if it was all real? If I could really travel to other worlds now, then I had a much better job now. My mother surprised me, and she was surprised that I'd gotten up by myself today when she came into my room to wake me.
Although I was awake early enough today, I took the last possible bus to get to work on time. I wouldn't give these cheapskates a minute of my life. Today was even more stressful than usual because Nina was ill, and so I had to stand at the counter all day and serve customers. As I wasn't used to this, it sometimes took a little longer because I hadn't entered the right thing into the till. The customers were annoyed because there was a line and they made fun of me for half the day. My boss wasn't thrilled with my performance that day either, and he made fun of me, asked me how I'd even gotten through school. He himself had inherited the store from his father, hadn't finished school, and never lifted a finger in his life. Although I was so beaten up, I was in a good mood on the bus home, because I'd be able to escape this stupid world. After all, I had my energy drinks. Today, I felt like trying raspberry. I poured the bag into my glass, mixed it again with a fork, and drank it down. It tasted damn good, too, and I read a bit of King's Dark Tower series over the next few hours. At some point, I got tired and felt the vibration again. I fell and flew. I saw colors and felt emotions. Then, I was suddenly cold. I was lying in the snow. In the snow. I wasn't dressed for this. I was wearing the jogging bottoms and a t-shirt that I'd been wearing in my room before I came into this world. Although it was freezing and I was already shivering, I was amazed at the landscape that was stretched out before me. The skyscrapers looked familiar. I must have been in New York. But it wasn't the New York I knew. Buildings had collapsed. There wasn't a soul out and about, and the snow was at least a half a meter high. No matter where I looked, there was no light anywhere. I got moving so I wouldn't freeze to death and took a few videos and pictures, just as the man of peace had told me to. While I was at it, I opened his Team Peace app. I saw 2 entries there, one from yesterday and, of course, one from today. Now, according to the app, I was in the same world. That couldn't be. It was warm here yesterday and the sun was shining a funny reddish color. Then it struck me. I was in the same world, but not in the same time. Yesterday, I was here in 2019. Today, I found myself in 2025. I wonder what had happened here. The man of peace would certainly find it interesting to see what happened to his home, if this was his home at all. I continued my march and decided to press the button labeled Peace if I didn't find shelter soon. After a few minutes, I saw light about 100 meters ahead of me. It was coming from the entrance hall of a large building that must have once been a hotel. I opened the door and saw that the light was coming from lighted garbage cans at the reception. A dozen people had gathered there to warm up. I grabbed a blanket that was lying on a couch by the entrance, put it around me, and carefully walked over to the people. "Hello, everyone," I said. No reply. Not even one of them looked up. Apparently, no one here was interested in company. Nevertheless, I wanted to get some information out of them so I could help the man of peace. What happened here? I mean, about the snow, and where are all the people? I wanted to know. An old woman lifted her head, trembling, and looked at me in disbelief. "Are you kidding us, boy? Where have you been for the last 6 years? Locked up in a cellar?" asked a burly-looking guy. "Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. You could say I have amnesia. I woke up outside in the snow," I said. "Ah. Well, wouldn't that be the strangest thing to happen here? Have you really forgotten everything? The creatures? The undead? The apocalypse?" the man asked. "The apocalypse? Oh man, no, I didn't know anything about that. That sucks. And what about the snow?" I asked. "The government thought that the creatures couldn't survive in the cold and tried to influence the weather. Unfortunately, they forgot to undo it, and the monsters are still here, only now they're freezing with us." "Great, isn't it?" the man replied. "Maybe I could prevent what happened here if I gave the man of peace the information. It could be that he had the means to stop the monsters before they contaminated the world." As I thought about it, I noticed that the stairs were completely barricaded with chairs, sofas, and other furniture. There were also 2 large cupboards in front of each elevator. I wondered what that was for. "Is there anything we can do to fix this?" lock the monsters away and adapt so that we can survive in the cold?" I asked. "All credit to you for your optimism, kid, but there are hardly any people left who could organize themselves. The best you can hope for is—" "Hey, wait a minute. You're one of them," the man yelled. He pointed to the Team Peace badge, which was now visible after my blanket had slipped a little. "What are you talking about?" "I'm not a monster," I said calmly. "You are the worst monsters. My granddaughter was eaten by a spider. Why did you do that?" "Go back to hell, you devil," the old woman grumbled. The others also started throwing garbage and other stuff at me. The sturdy man hit me in the pit of the stomach and I went down. "Throw him in the elevator," the old woman demanded. "Yeah, take him upstairs," shouted another. Two of them pushed the cupboards aside and another went into a small technical room, apparently to switch on the power supply to the elevators. The burly guy grabbed me by the collar and threw me into the elevator, the doors of which had now opened. "Have fun, monster. Up there, you're under your own," he said, and press 10. What did he mean by that? And what did he have against my badge? The elevator went up, stopped on the 10th floor, and came to a halt. They'd cut the power again. Great. I would have to look around and then probably press the peace button. There was probably no other way out of here. These people were totally crazy, and somehow they reminded me of the customers in the bakery who treated me badly even though I hadn't done anything to them. Only a little moonlight shone into the empty corridors of this floor from outside, so I had to use my cell phone to be able to see anything. The hotel was pretty run down and dirty. Someone had smeared "Heil Azil" in red paint on one of the walls. I didn't want to know who Azil was. Then I stopped because I heard a noise. I would say it was a kind of a clicking. I turned around and suddenly I saw a girl my age standing behind me. "Oh, man! Did you scare me? How did you get up here?" I asked. She had long black hair, and I found her quite attractive. She didn't look like she hated me either, although she was staring at my Team Peace badge. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm Marcy. I'm like you, I guess. I travel back and forth and end up in places like this." "What's that pin you've got there?" she asked. "I'm Julius, pleased to meet you. I got it from the Man of Peace." "Man of Peace?" she replied. "Who's that?" I couldn't answer because I heard that clicking sound again, and this time I could see where it was coming from. A disgusting, monstrously thing looking like a cross between a human and a spider jumped out of one of the rooms. Its legs were hairy, but it looked as if they had once been human arms and legs. Marcy didn't seem to have encountered such a creature for the first time and immediately ran away. I ran away too, but there was a dead end at the end of the corridor and only one window. The spider was after me, and I could hardly think straight, but somehow managed to get my cell phone out of my pocket and open up the Team Peace app. Just before I reached the window, I pressed the button that said, "Peace," and before my eyes, the window turned into a red door. Without hesitation, I pushed it open and slid onto the floor of the Man of Peace's establishment. "You'll clear the snow away yourself, young man," said Mr. Richards as the door closed again. I swept the snow away and then knocked on the door of Mr. Peace's office. He found my report about the future of this world and its inhabitants very interesting, but didn't seem surprised. "Don't worry about those people. If you want to change something, you can't please everyone. The spin and the other creatures may have been my doing, but that doesn't give them the right to punish you for it. Give me your cell phone again. I'd like to try something. As a nocturnal wanderer, you can influence the place where you land. I'll enter the coordinates into your app, but you have to do something too. Before you go back to sleep, think about fog. Only fog. Listen to songs about fog and watch a movie with fog. There's one by the King that's quite good. If we're lucky, you'll end up in the forest of eternal fog. It's hard to find your way home around there, but you might make it. There is a lake in the forest, and this lake is supposedly a gateway to the Sea of Darkness. It's one of the last and most mysterious places I haven't been able to explore yet, and I urgently need to explore it. I think danger lurks there. If you could bring me a sample of the lake's water in this test tube, that would be fantastic. If you manage to do that, all you have to do is give me a sum of money, and I'll give it to you." "Well, thank you. I'll do my best to fulfill the order, sir," I said to him and gave the man a piece of my phone. After that, I helped Mr. Richards clean some of the test subjects' rooms. So this is where the spiders and other monsters came from. Maybe that wasn't quite right, but at least the man of peace was nice to me. That was more than I could say for the people in the hotel. Shortly afterwards, everything started vibrating again, and I woke up in front of my computer once again. As I was now simply exhausted and my back was aching, I decided to take the day off sick. I slept for about 3 hours, but didn't wander into other worlds, so it was actually down to the energy drinks. I stayed in bed all day thinking about my new ability. It was quite a crazy change in my life. I also wondered who this girl was. She called herself Marcy and claimed to be just like me. I wondered if she'd survived the spider attack. I wished she had. I saw on my cell phone that my boss had tried to call me 17 times, and he left me several voicemails. I didn't care. If I got this next job for the man of peace, I would never have to go back to that stupid bakery and get yelled at by the customers and my boss. Later that evening, I turned on the movie The Fog while I mixed my next energy drink. This time, it was citrus. After the first sip, I didn't doubt for a second that this would be my favorite flavor from then on. After I'd finished the movie, I watched a few more hours of scary stories with a fog theme. Holding my phone with the coordinates firmly in my hand around 3:30 in the morning, I noticed that my eyes were slowly closing, and I kept thinking about fog. Then the vibration started, and I fell and flew and saw the indescribable colors in the corridors of the multiverse again. Then I saw nothing more. Although that wasn't quite right. I saw a gray broth right in front of my nose. It was fog, very thick fog. Then it had probably worked. That was great, but now I was faced with a completely different problem, as the fog was much thicker than it had been before, and it certainly wouldn't be easy to find a lake here. I tried turning off the light on my smartphone again, but it had no effect. So I started moving very slowly to avoid accidentally falling off a cliff or tripping over a tree trunk or something similar. After a few meters, I found proof that I really was in a forest because I almost ran into a tree. I couldn't see even a half a meter away, and from then on I stretched out my arms to spot potential obstacles early on. Although this helped me not to break my nose, it didn't get me to the lake. I couldn't think of anything that would help me track down the water. Damn it. I had to do this job to get the money. I never wanted to go back to my old job. So I went on until I heard something. It wasn't the splashing of water I'd hoped for, but snapping branches and footsteps. I wasn't alone here. "I knew I'd find you again," said Marie. I was scared and flinched. To be honest, I hadn't expected to meet her or anyone else here. "How'd you find me here?" I asked, startled. Maybe I memorized your scent." "Traveling alone is so lonesome. Can I join you on your adventure?" she asked. I actually appreciated the peace and quiet, but maybe there was nothing wrong with traveling with a pretty girl. After all, they didn't usually show much interest in me. "All right, I'm sure it won't hurt," I replied with a smile. "I saw you disappear through a red door yesterday. How did you do that? I've never seen anything like it." "Well, that's not actually my doing. The door leads to the man of peace," I replied. "That sounds exciting. Can you make the door appear now? I'd like to meet the man of peace," said Marie. "Not now. He wants me to find a lake that's connected to the Sea of Darkness and bring him a sample of the water. When we have that, we can bring it to him together." "That sounds good. I know the lake. I think I can take you there." "Really? How can you do that? I can't see a meter in front of me here. How are you going to be able to find the lake again?" "Just trust me," said Marcy. Well, I had nothing to lose. My own attempts hadn't gotten me anywhere either, so what the hell? Marcy went ahead and I was close behind her.
After about an hour, I heard the splashing of the water and was amazed. How had she done that? Shortly afterwards, we were actually standing in front of the lake, the dimensions of which I couldn't estimate through the fog, but something told me that the size was huge, a size that would blow my mind. I took the test tube out of my trouser pocket and filled it with some water from the lake. "Thank you for your help. I'm sure the Man of Peace will be pleased," I said. I opened the Team Peace app on my phone and pressed the Peace button. A red door immediately appeared in the water, which Marcy seemed very happy about. I walked through it, and she followed me. We greeted Mr. Richards and then knocked on the door of the Man of Peace's office. "Come in," he called. "Hello, sir. I've got the sample you asked for. It all worked. This here is Marcy. She's been helping me and might be interested in joining the team." "What's that?" Marcy laughed as she started to change. I took a few steps to the side and was now standing next to the boy called Lucas and the head nurse called Festus. Marcy no longer looked attractive, but quite dead. It's your fault. I've enjoyed my existence. I devoured all the souls who dared to play the elevator game, but thanks to the apocalypse you caused, my last victim was able to escape back to her world," she said. The Man of Peace seemed surprised. "You're the witch from the inner world, right? What are you going to do now? Bore me to death with your drivel?" he asked, amused. "No, I want revenge. I'm carrying a hex bag that makes it impossible for anyone present to escape through a portal. You'll have to damage me for being torn from world to world since this incident and barely having any control over my existence. I'm constantly being eaten by one of your monsters and tormented for days as I regenerate, but once I've eaten your soul, that will change. You're the most skillful inner-world traveler that has ever existed, and with your power I will be more powerful than ever before. Everyone here is welcome to support me. I know you want revenge. Lucas and Festus, he changed you. He destroyed your lives just as he destroyed mine. Help me and I'll give you your lives back," said the witch from the world in between. The muscular Festus, who was wearing a nurse's outfit and had a bag on his head, and Lucas, the boy, didn't say anything. Then the witch started moving and walking toward the Man of Peace. Festus actually followed her, but Lucas stopped. He seemed to be watching with interest. Perhaps the boy was more intelligent and cunning than he looked. When the witch stretched out her sinister hand toward the Man of Peace, I wanted to help him, but that wasn't necessary. Festus grabbed her head with his huge hand and crushed it within a second. The witch's skull cracked and stained the floor of the office. Festus was stronger than I had realized. I swept up the witch's skull with Mr. Richards and dumped it into her new cell. She was now one of the Man of Peace's test subjects and would be tortured until the end of time. He called me into his office again before I had to leave. "I noticed that you wanted to help me. I thought that was really commendable. Not everyone would do that, as you've seen," said the Man of Peace. That was a matter of course for me. They treated me well, so I help them when they're in danger, I replied. "Oh, let's not get carried away. I'm far more powerful than everyone thinks. I've never really been in danger." I could have shattered that witch into 1,000 pieces with a single thought, but not everyone needs to know that. Do you understand? I understood that. From then on, I was one of the most important members of Team Peace.
I think my parents sold me to a demon. Jake Dean was a gifted boy. He was now 11 years old, and he was getting better and better at moving objects like a cup or plate with his mind. His parents forbade him to play his games, but when they weren't around, he could practice in peace. He liked his talent, but his parents were afraid of it. They called him a freak, and sometimes they beat him or locked him in the dark cupboard. The beatings were bad, but he preferred them to being locked in the cupboard. At least they didn't ignore him when they hit him. Jake himself found that his powers weren't scary at all. They were more like the superpowers of the heroes in the comic books he used to read. They were part of a righteous group and used their powers for higher goals. He wanted to be like that when he grew up. His parents would certainly not agree, but maybe he could convince them that he wasn't a freak, because even though they beat him and insulted him, Jake loved his parents. The few evenings when they sat together in front of the TV and watched a series without arguing were absolute heaven for Jake. Because even though being a superhero was cool, he wanted nothing more than for his mom and dad to love him. It was a Friday evening, and he was lying in his bed as usual, reading his comics with the help of the nightlight. Captain Justice, V-Man, and Barbarian Girl defied the attacks of the nasty Dr. Butcher and saved the day. Jake's eyes slowly closed with a good feeling. The good feeling disappeared as soon as the most vivid dream the boy had ever had began. He was on a dark street where most of the lanterns were out. The street was covered in garbage, blood, and bullet casings. Jake wondered what had happened here. Besides some shell casings, he found something else. It was an old-fashioned doll whose eyes had been burned out. Something told Jake that this doll used to be alive, but now it was just an empty shell. But something here was alive, something dangerous. Jake could feel it. The boy turned around and looked for a monster or creature in the street, but could see nothing. Then he heard the heavy breathing that seemed to come from directly above him. The sinister figure, which seemed to have no solid form, hovered about a meter above his head. It was made of darkness, had 2 black claws and glowing red eyes. Jake had never seen anything like it before and was terrified. However, the dark creature did not attack him. It looked as if it wanted to do so, but was holding back. It briefly stretched out one of its dark claws toward the boy, but then retreated. The dream ended. When Jake woke up again, it was already 10:15 in the morning. He hadn't felt this tired and exhausted for a long time. Now he could hear what had woken him up. It was voices, strange voices. They never normally had visitors. Jake's parents were afraid that someone might find out the boy wasn't normal. Apparently, today was different. Curious, Jake crept over to his bedroom door, opened it a small crack, and took a look at the 2 visitors sitting at the living room table with his parents. The young woman and the man were well dressed. Both wore a white shirt and black cloth pants. They each had a badge with a smiley face on their shirts. Team Peace was written around the smiley. They had some documents with them and were apparently talking to Jake's parents about him. This special school, this institution for gifted children, has long been the best place for boys and girls who don't get enough support at normal schools. Your son scored extremely well on a test we developed and sent to schools across the country and would benefit greatly from living in our facility from now on, the woman said. Jake was shocked. Were his parents going to put him in some kind of boarding school? It also seemed strange to him that the woman was talking about a test. They hadn't taken a test at school for weeks. Why was she lying? Did she know about his special talent? And if so, how? I don't really know. Isn't it traumatic for a child to be taken away from its familiar surroundings and separated from its parents? Asked Jake's father. Thanks, Dad, Jake thought to himself. He didn't want to be away from his parents and was happy that they didn't want to get rid of him either. Sure, they're right, of course. It's not easy for the parents to part with their child either. That's why they will be compensated with the sum of $500,000, which will be deposited in their account today if they sign here, said the man. Now, Jake's parents' eyes grew wide. $500,000 would change their lives. Now, Jake's parents couldn't believe that they were not only thinking about it, but actually picking up the clipboard and signing. His parents had just sold him. He carefully closed the door to let the shock sink in. Everything would change. Through the closed door, he heard the 2 employees of the facility tell his parents that it would be best if they went for a short walk, as it would be easier for the boy and for them. His father noted that the money had already arrived in his account and apparently agreed to the walk. Jake heard the door to their apartment close and panicked. Now he was alone with these strange people. Didn't his parents care what happened to him? When someone pushed down the handle of his bedroom door, he took a few steps back. The woman and the man entered. "Hello, Jake. Please don't be afraid. Everything will be fine. We're going to take you to a place where you'll be better off than ever before. You'll be supported there and have a great future ahead of you," said the woman. "You were lying. There was no test. Who are you really?" Jake wanted to know. "Oh, you cheeky little bastard. You can come with us in peace now, or we'll make you." "Move along, friend," scolded the woman with the Team Peace badge. They shouldn't be so sure about that. Jake had never used his powers on a human before, but he was willing to give it a try. Just as he was about to concentrate on the two liars, something hit him on the shoulder. It made him feel hot and tired. Jake saw that it was some kind of small dart, then he fainted. When he woke up again, the boy was lying in his bed. In his new bed. It had happened. His eyes filled with tears as he realized that his parents didn't love him. Not even a little. But should he be surprised? Probably not. As he thought about it, he realized that it wasn't even the money that was the reason his parents had given him away. The reason was simpler. They were afraid of him. He scared them because he was different. When a child is different, doesn't conform to the norm, doesn't fit into the usual mold, it's a big challenge for their parents. And not all parents are up to these challenges. Jake cried some more, and then decided to at least explore his new surroundings. His room was small but nicely furnished and bright. It had a large television and even some games consoles. On the shelves, he found a few books by King, Tolkien, and other authors. Unfortunately, there were no comics. When he tried to open the door, it didn't budge an inch. Of course it didn't. It looked like an ordinary wooden door with a coat of white paint, but when the boy touched it, he realized that it wasn't made of wood. It was cold and probably made of heavy steel. Nothing here was as it seemed. That shouldn't really surprise him either. After all, he had been kidnapped by two liars. Jake was startled when the large television on the wall suddenly came on. A young woman with blonde pigtails and glasses appeared on the screen. She was also wearing this badge. "Hello, dear new student. Welcome to the Officially Abstract School Institution System, OASIS for short. In the OASIS, you will want for nothing and you will be assigned important work. We at Team Peace will do everything we can to make your stay as pleasant as possible. We hope that you'll be proud to be able to make your contribution to absolute peace in all known worlds from now on. Now, you're welcome to go out for a bite to eat. May peace be with you." The last part was unexpected. Jake thought to himself as the door opened. The hallway was long and completely white. There were lots of monitors on the walls. They showed the woman who had just greeted him. She was pointing to the left. Kahale was written under her picture. That was probably a funny name for the place where he would eat his meals from now on. And since Jake's stomach was growling, it might not be a bad idea to stop by. The dining room looked just as white and plain as the hallway. There were about a dozen long white tables. However, there was only one girl sitting there with her back to him. Maybe she was a newcomer like him and was eating outside the usual hours. Jake walked over to the food counter. A big fat man was waiting there to take his order. "What can I get you, young man? We have meatloaf, rice and vegetable stir-fry, or sandwiches. For dessert today, we have a small piece of apple pie," said the fat man. Even though the menu sounded quite good, Jake wasn't too hopeful. So far, he felt like he was in prison, and the food was never good in prisons. "I'll have the meatloaf and a slice of apple pie," Jake replied. He thought he was being far too polite. After all, he had just been kidnapped by those two psychopaths. He got his tray with the requested menu and then sat down at the table where the girl was sitting, but a few meters away from her. He didn't want to be intrusive. While he wondered if the girl also had special powers, he tried a piece of the meatloaf served with potato, scallops, carrots, and gravy. Damn! The meatloaf was the tastiest thing Jake had ever eaten in his life. Everything was just right. The consistency of the meat, the amount of salt, the spices, and the gravy. He hadn't expected that. What he also hadn't expected was for the girl to slide over to him. "Hello, I'm Nina. Nice to meet you," she said. "Hi, I'm Jake," said the boy shyly. "Are you new here?" she asked. "Yes, I've just arrived. Those crazy people kidnapped me." "Yes, we're all like that. They want something from us. We're special, you know that, don't you?" Nina wanted to know. "Yes, I know that, but what exactly do they want from us? What do they want to use our talents?" asked Jake. "For some nonsense. They're always talking about peace, war, and the man of peace. He probably needs us for some big project, but that bothers me. I'm not interested in stupid peace. I'd rather be free," replied Nina. They talked for a while and were then told by the woman on the screen to go back to their rooms. Jake obeyed as he wanted to save any resistance for later. For now, it was important to find out more about the facility. In his room, he turned on the TV and saw that it was 3 p.m. The TV only had one app, which was called Freedom TV and was a kind of streaming service. There were thousands of movies on there, many of which were sequels or versions of well-known movies that Jake didn't know. He zapped around a bit until it was 3:59. Then the Freedom TV app switched off and the woman from earlier appeared again. "Hello, dear newcomer. At 4 p.m. you can expect a great hour of free time in the courtyard or in the recreation room. Alternatively, you can sign up for one of the sports programs such as soccer, golf, or judo. At 5 p.m. duty calls and you have to work for an hour. The reward is dinner at 6 p.m. Have fun," said the woman, and his door opened again. Sports activities. Judo? Jake almost felt like he was in a luxury hotel for children, if it hadn't been for the announced work. When the boy stepped into the hallway this time, he wasn't alone. A lot of other children were making their way to the recreation room and the courtyard. They passed the sports halls, where there were already a group of children wearing white martial arts suits. The recreation room was very large with lots of board games, hammocks, and game consoles, as well as televisions. Most of the children went in here, but Jake wanted to see the courtyard. Maybe there was a way he could escape there. Outside there was the football pitch, and right next to it was the courtyard. There were benches, table tennis tables, and a small garden with a pond. A boy with glasses was sitting on one of the benches. Like Jake, he was alone, so he sat down next to him. "Hi, I'm Jake," he said. The boy was surprised but seemed pleased. "Hi, I'm Mitch. Are you new here?" "Yes, I came here at lunchtime today. Have you been here long? Have you been kidnapped too?" "Of course. All of us here have been taken from our homes against our will. I think it's been 2 years since I was taken," Mitch said. "Wow, that long? What's it like here?" Jake wanted to know. "It's actually nice. You have lots of toys, there's good food, and there's never a fight. If someone starts a fight, they're punished severely. They really value peace here." "What do they actually mean by peace? And how are we supposed to help? What do we do at work?" "I don't know exactly. You sit in a chair and are supposed to concentrate on certain things. You forget what happens when you've finished." "That doesn't sound too bad somehow. After all, you can have fun here and you seem to be safe," said Jake. "I wouldn't necessarily call it safe. It was a few months ago when I first noticed it. Some of the kids disappear after a while. I guess the facility is behind it. Maybe they get burnt out or something is done to them to squeeze the last bit of energy out of them. We used to be a small clique of 5 people. Now it's just me left. All my friends are no longer alive," said Mitch. "Maybe we can be friends," Jake said to cheer him up.
He spent the rest of his free time with Mitch. They watched the soccer game and Mitch showed him the different fish in the small pond. Then it was time. The signal sounded. "All children, please go to the work area. Thank you," said a voice. None of the children even thought about disobeying. In the long hallway, Mitch was assigned to another room and Jake was alone again. A man in a white shirt who also wore the Team Peace badge led him to a small room with just one chair. He sat Jake down in it and strapped him in. The boy got scared. Then the images began to appear in his mind's eye and a voice spoke in his head. "Please, think of the man of peace now. Lend him your strength and do your bit. Give in. Make your contribution. Give in. Make your contribution. May peace be with you." Jake was mesmerized. He saw a strange land in a strange world. He saw huge monsters, a spider as big as a skyscraper, a wolf just as big, a beetle, and other monsters. He knew they were dead. Then he saw disgusting creatures, undead, human, mutated spiders, and other abominations. He focused on them and on the man everyone called the Man of Peace. He found the spiders the worst. They looked like spiders, but they were actually human. Their 8 legs used to be human arms and legs, which were now covered in bristly black hair. The lumpy body was also covered with the same hair and some slime. The head still looked somewhat human, but had 6 eyes and the mouth parts of a spider. Then everything went dark. Jake worked. When he woke up again, the man was unbuckling him from his chair. "Thanks for your good work, Jake. We could do with someone like you here. It's 6 p.m. You can go to the chewing hall now. There are pancakes, savory or sweet," said the man. Jake was hungry, very hungry as if he had just played football for 3 hours and had eaten for the last time the day before. In the chewing hall, he got himself a plate of pancakes and 3 different sauces. A red fruit sauce with strawberries, a poke sauce, and a mango sauce. He also saw Mitch at one of the tables and sat down next to him. "So how was your first job?" Mitch asked. I don't know, Jake replied. That's what Mitch had thought. "The pancakes are always good," he said. "Yeah, I think so too. Tell me, do you know a girl called Nina?" "I met her at lunch this afternoon," Jake asked. "Nina? No, I don't know anyone like that. I've never seen her here before. Maybe she's new too. That would make sense," said Mitch. The two of them talked for a while and then went to their respective rooms. Lucas was still tired and went straight to bed. Was this his new life now? Food, leisure, work, food, and sleep? And was he really doing any good with his work? Jake fell asleep and dreamed of his parents. It was late at night when he was awoken by someone. It was Nina. "Jake, wake up. I need your help," she said. "What's going on? How did you get in here?" asked Jake. "It's not important. It's happening again. The people who work here take one of the kids. I saw them outside Mitch's door," said Nina excitedly. Jake hopped out of bed and agreed to help his friend. He walked out with Nina and over to Mitch's room. The door was open and they stepped inside. Mitch was lying on the floor. His body looked empty, drained, and decomposed. Jake could see the sheer panic in his dead eyes. "Wait a minute. Hey, Mitch told me he doesn't know you. Then how do you know his name?" "Ha ha 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 ha. I know all the names, and I've memorized yours in particular. You have more energy in you than all the other children. I've wanted to eat you ever since I saw you," said Nina. But Nina probably was not her real name. It was the demon from the dark street he had been dreaming about. "You own this place?" Jake asked angrily. "No, it belongs to the Man of Peace, but I don't feel like working for him anymore. I'm not interested in peace. I like war. But the Man of Peace doesn't know that I think that way, and it will stay that way, because he will think that you and your friend killed each other," said the demon.
It was probably his job to track down talented children for the man of peace who could then be recruited. The demon now reached out to Jake and grabbed him by the collar. Jake felt the creature sucking energy out of him. It had probably done the same to poor Mitch. What bothered Jake the most was that he had trusted Nina and liked her, but she had betrayed him, just like his parents. That made him so angry. Jake gave free rein to his anger and decided to give the energy-sucking demon more than it could handle. He poured more and more energy into the demon. "What are you doing, boy? Stop that! That's enough for me!" the demon shouted. "But it's not enough for me," said Jake, and exploded the energy in the demon. The demon was torn into 1,000 pieces. Jake went to his knees. He had never used his powers like this before. He was proud of him. Somehow, he was now like one of the superheroes from his comics because he had defeated a demon from hell. The boy was startled when someone stepped through the door. The man was wearing a black shirt, had green eyes, and was also wearing the badge. He came into the room and put his hand on Jake's shoulder. "Good work, Jake. It's a pleasure to meet you, Jake. I'm the man of peace," he said, handing him a Team Peace badge. Jake accepted it. The horror he had seen today was nothing compared to what he was about to experience. I played the elevator game. Something went terribly wrong. It was pretty stuffy and crowded on the train. My class was excited about the class trip to New York, but the ride there sucked. We would have loved to fly, but neither our parents nor the school could afford it. It was impressive that even our shabby hotel was huge. Mrs. Grimshaw told us that it had 18 floors. While she got the room keys for us, Mr. Garrison told us what to expect over the next 5 days. Visits to various museums, a shopping day, and visits to all kinds of sites. The rooms were of course divided up so that the girls were in rooms with other girls and the boys with other boys. How boring. I was already 12 years old, but what the hell? At some point, the teachers went to bed. Then we would meet up and play games like Spin the Bottle or Truth or Dare. I shared a room with Eileen and Sarah, which was perfect because we were all friends. One by one, we took the elevator to the top. As there were so many of us, a real queue had formed. When it was finally our turn, Marius squeezed into the elevator. It was quite cramped with all the suitcases. "Do you have to do that?" I said. "Don't be like that, Tanya. I don't want to wait any longer. We've been standing here forever." "All right, but don't step on my foot." "I won't. Don't worry." "Hey, you know what? We should play the elevator game. This hotel has more than 10 floors." We three girls didn't know what he was talking about. We didn't know what an elevator game was. "Oh, man. You have no idea what this is, do you? I'll explain it to you. First, you enter the elevator with your friends. No outsiders are allowed in. Not during the whole game. You have to start on the first floor. Then you go up to the 4th floor, then down to the 2nd, then up to the 6th floor, then back down to the 2nd floor. Next you go up to the 10th floor, only to go back down to the 5th floor. Here, you may come across a young woman. You are not allowed to look at her or talk to her, not even if she asks you strange questions. Then you press the button to the 2nd floor. But if you've done everything correctly, the elevator goes up to the 10th floor. However, this is not the 10th floor, you know, but that of another world. It's dark and haunted. So are you in or are you scared? To be honest, the three of us had expected it to be something similar to Spin the Bottle. Something, you know, where someone has to kiss somebody at the end, rather than a trip to the spirit world. "What happens if you talk to the woman?" asked Eileen. "You better not, it says on the internet. It lets her into our world. She then follows you home, kills you, and takes your place." "Oh, you're full of it," I said. "I don't believe a word." "I didn't make it up. Just look on the internet. You can read it everywhere." Well, by now we'd reached our room, and Marius had to go down another corridor. As we were unpacking our suitcases, I received a message. It was from Marius, of course. He sent me loads of links, which I immediately showed to the girls. And he was right. There were a lot of reports from people who had played this elevator game. Most of them warned you not to try it. There was something else under the links. Come to the elevator at 11:45 and we'll play. The game sounded kind of exciting, but he could kiss that goodbye. Of course, we would go over to Amelia's tonight. That's where all the boys were going. We'd also heard that she'd brought a few beers. The weird elevator game didn't stand a chance against that. We waited patiently until 9:30, which was when Miss Grimshaw made her rounds and told everyone to get some sleep and stick to the rules. We agreed with her and yawned to show her that we were already pretty tired. When she left our room again, we got out our toiletry bags and put on our makeup for the meeting. Shortly after 10, we went over to Amelia's and we were handed a beer straight away. That was nice, but this place was full of girls. I guess the boys are still to come, I asked Amelia. Oh, haven't you heard? Mr. Garrison is secretly watching some stupid martial arts event on pay TV with them. They're not coming tonight. I nodded and pretended not to mind. In truth, the three of us thought it was pretty stupid. Instead of playing spin the bottle with some pretty boys, we did our hair, drank the disgusting beer, and watched models on TV. Shortly before 11:30, I remembered the message from Marius. Without a word, I held the WhatsApp message on my cell phone out to the other two. They nodded. We told the others we were going to bed and then left. We could see from a distance that Marius was blushing when he saw us wearing makeup and provocative outfits. He wasn't usually the type to have much to do with girls. "There you are. I thought you had your pants full," he said, and fetched the elevator. "We're not scared, but we're surprised you're here instead of watching sports with the others," Sarah said. Somehow he looked a little sad now. "You know I don't fit in with them, and I don't care about martial arts." It went ding, and the elevator opened. It was ridiculous, but I had a bad feeling when I entered the elevator. I think the others felt the same. First, we went down to the first floor. That's where the game started, after all. We were lucky. Nobody wanted to get in at this time of day. Okay, let's get started. We're going up to the 4th floor. Marius pressed 4 and our pulse rates increased. It was somehow quite exciting, better than doing each other's hair for hours. We arrived on the 4th floor, the doors opened, and nothing happened. Okay, we're moving on, down to the 2nd floor. The doors closed again, nothing happened on the 2nd floor either. Okay, now we're going up to the 6th floor, said Marius, and he pressed the button. Nothing happens here, complained Eileen. Of course not. Nothing happens until the end on the 10th floor, unless the woman gets on the 5th floor, but I don't think so. If she does, ignore her at all costs. We had now reached the 6th floor, and Marius pressed the button to get to the 2nd floor. Everything was normal there, too. Okay, now we're going up to the 10th floor, but nothing happens there yet, only at the end, explained Marius. And he was right. The doors opened and the corridor looked exactly as it should. A beautiful blue carpet, bright light, and nice pictures of different plants hanging on the walls. Nevertheless, my heart started beating like crazy. This time, Marius didn't say where we were going, but we all knew. The 5th floor was our destination. That was the floor where the strange woman sometimes got on. The ride down felt strange. My body tingled a little as if it was electrified. I got goosebumps when the door opened. Then we were all relieved. There was no woman to be seen, and the corridor looked normal. Thank goodness. Okay, now I'm pushing the 2nd floor button, but we're going to the 10th if everything goes smoothly. If anything seems weird, don't get out of the car. Getting back home isn't easy, said Marius, and he pressed the button. The doors closed, but then they stopped. A hand darted into the open slot and held them open. We were all startled. The doors opened again.
A young woman with long black hair wearing a business outfit climbed into the car with us. We all stared straight ahead and tried not to notice her, although she looked pretty normal when she entered the elevator. The elevator doors closed. There was a clear sense that it was ignoring the order to go down. Instead, it went up. It had worked. "Do you kids play games like this often?" said the strange woman. How did she know what we were doing? Could it be that she really was the cursed woman from the netherworld? We continued to stare straight ahead and didn't make a sound. "Do you think your parents will miss you much when you're dead?" she said. Now, she kind of sounded like a witch, and I noticed that Eileen was crying. "Don't answer her. Ignore her," I said. Unable to believe what I had just said, the woman turned around so quickly and looked me straight in the face that I felt as if she had teleported there. She was only a few centimeters away from my face. She also looked different now. Her skin was pale and her eyes seemed to be bleeding. "What are you saying, girl? Don't you want to talk to me? I can help you." Ding! The elevator stopped on the 10th floor. "Don't go out there. Stay with me forever." Without thinking, all four of us sprinted out of the elevator into the hallway. It was only when we were a few meters away from the witch that we noticed how dark it was. The lights weren't working properly. Many of them were flickering or hanging from the ceiling. It even got darker when the elevator doors closed again. Still, the disgusting woman had disappeared. "Where are we?" Sarah asked in a broken voice. "Oh man, this is it. The other world. Look at this. The hotel is completely destroyed," said Marius. Indeed, it was. Not only were the lamps broken, but many doors had been kicked in and the wallpaper was hanging off the wall. We went back to the elevator and pressed the button, but it didn't come, not even after several minutes. So we decided to look for another way. Maybe there was another elevator. As we wandered through the creepy corridors, I realized that this electrifying feeling was even more intense here. There was something written in big letters on the wall next to a room that had a door that had been kicked in. "Hail Azael." I knew the name Azael from my religious lessons. It was a demon from hell, and there were obviously people here who worshipped him. We heard a noise from the room with the kicked-in door. Something had fallen over. "What was that?" whimpered Eileen. No one answered at first. Then Marius took heart. I think he felt responsible. He wanted to protect us. "It was probably nothing, or maybe a rat. I'll go and see, okay? And then we'll go on. We'll be back in our rooms in half an hour." I wouldn't have thought he was that brave and mature. He took a step forward and stood right in front of the smashed door. It was dark in the room, so he couldn't see much. "Hello? Is anyone there? We just want to go home. There are 4 of us. If you don't want to help us, leave us alone." Smiling, he turned to Eileen, who was really beaming at him. He made her feel safe and strong, at least until the moment the spider bit his head off. It happened so quickly. The monster wasn't actually a spider. It was a cross between a human and a spider. At least the head looked human, except for the 6 eyes. The rest was slimy and hairy and looked a lot like a spider. Marius didn't stand a chance. It jumped out of the room and landed with its body on Marius' shoulders. It had 6 legs wrapped around him, while the sharp teeth that covered the whole lower part of the spider's body devoured our friend's head. We all screamed and ran. We could no longer help the poor thing. We turned down another corridor and just kept running. Once again, we turned off at the end of this seemingly endless corridor, but immediately regretted it. The whole corridor, right up to our feet, was full of undead who were now all heading in our direction. Eileen couldn't slow down fast enough and fell straight into their arms. The hungry zombies immediately pounced on her, grabbed her, bit her ear off, bit her stomach and face. That was even worse to watch than Marius's death.
The other undead, who didn't get anything from our friend, now concentrated on Sarah and me. I quickly grabbed her and we sprinted in the other direction. The monsters were faster than I thought. They were chasing us. At the end of the corridor, I could see something. It looked like an elevator. At last, Sarah howled and I literally had to drag her behind me. "Please run. There's an elevator. It's just up ahead. It's not far. Hurry," I said. Then she slumped down. "I can't do it anymore. It hurts so much. They scratched me when they took Eileen. It hurts so much." Her skin turned quite pale. There was indeed a deep scratch on her arm. The whole wound was greenish in color and shimmered strangely. "Sarah, Sarah, keep coming. They'll be here soon," I shouted. She answered, but the answer was no longer human. It was a grunt or a moan. And she snapped. Not at me yet, but I thought she would soon. She was infected. With tears in my eyes, I ran as fast as I could to the elevator and pressed the button. And sure enough, the elevator came. I quickly jumped in and pressed the button to the second floor. The main thing was to get out of here. When the doors closed, Sarah was only a few meters away from me. I went downstairs and started to cry. With sadness, but also with relief. Then I remembered that it wasn't over yet. I had to go through the sequence of floors that Marius explained to us. The door opened and I saw another ruined corridor. Again, there was something written in big letters on the wall. "The demon lords are coming." I didn't even want to know what that was about and pressed the button. The elevator moved on. When the doors opened again, I saw a bunch of undead again. But they didn't see me. They were fighting with a group of people. There was a young blonde girl, a tall, dark-skinned swordsman, a boy with a revolver, and a few others. I think they saw me too, but I didn't want to have anything to do with the undead and drove on. When I arrived at the fifth, she was standing right outside the door this time. She'd been waiting for me. Of course, she stood right next to me and put her dead hand on my shoulder. "Where are your friends, sweetheart?" said the witch from the in-between world. Again, I started to cry, but I ignored her. I kept going, and finally the elevator went down at the end of the hall to the first floor. I was so excited I didn't want to see the undead or the ruined hallways again. The doors opened, and I saw the entrance to the hotel. It was bright, and there were lots of people in the foyer. I was home. "You better stay with me, little one." "No," I replied and left the elevator. It seemed to be mid-morning already. We'd been out all night. I was shocked to see that I had blood and other stuff on my dress, but I didn't care. From the foyer, I could see Miss Grimshaw standing outside the hotel with my class. I'm sure she was worried. I walked quickly out to her and the others. Miss Grimshaw, something bad has happened. Marius, Eileen, and Sarah are dead." My teacher looked at me in amazement. "You're covered in blood. What happened to you, girl? What's your name?" My own teacher had forgotten what my name was. As I tried to hide my annoyance, I noticed that the sun was somehow so orange and a little darker than usual today. "How can you forget that? I'm in your class after all. I'm Tanya." The whole class looked at me like I was crazy. No, that wasn't quite true. They looked at me like I was a crazy stranger. "We don't have a Tanya in my class, but that doesn't matter. Come on, we'll call the police, my dear." Miss Grimshaw took me by the hand and walked me to reception. I might have been safe here, but I wasn't alone. Part 2. I met a witch in an elevator. She follows me now. I didn't belong here. It was a stupid mistake that I ended up here. I had played the famous elevator game with my friends, and what could I say? We didn't win. The 3 of them are dead. I was able to get out of the elevator alive, but I was no longer in my own world. The world I ended up in was very similar to mine. Sure, there were a few differences. The sunlight looked different. Historical events had happened very differently, and Oh yes, me and my family didn't exist here. So when I arrived in this world, I was first sent to an emergency shelter run by the Youth Welfare Office. Of course, nobody bought my story, neither the police, nor the Youth Welfare Office, nor anybody. They were sure that I'd made it all up to avoid having to tell the true story. I would certainly be a victim of violence and sexual assault and would escape into my fantasy world. In the beginning, I fought against it and got into trouble all the time. No one could deal with me. Then, I stopped telling my story and blended in. At least, that's how it was supposed to appear. This always gave me the luxury of being placed with a nice foster family. The Shropshires were great people, but they weren't my parents. My parents were out there somewhere in another world worrying about me. I tried as hard as I could to pretend to my foster parents, but they could tell I was unhappy. They thought it was terrible that I always dressed in black, dyed my hair black, and wore black lipstick. That was just part of my way of expressing my feelings, and they had to come to terms with it. Over the next few months, I read a lot. A few esoteric works, but mainly scientific books. I wanted to know if there was any tangible information about other worlds. And indeed, this theory was known here. They called them dimensions. But that probably meant the same thing. Around the time I was reading the books, I realized that she had been following me. We had encountered a witch during the elevator game. The rules said you weren't allowed to talk to her, and I'd broken that rule. Apparently, that gave her the power to follow me. The first time I saw her was when I looked out of the window in the evening. She was standing on the other side of the street and just grinning. Her skin was still very pale, her face was sunken like a dead man's, and her wet hair hung in her face. Then she walked on and left me alone for a few weeks. But then, she became really aggressive. I saw her several times in the mirrors in the bathroom and in my own room. I taped up my mirrors as a result, but of course, I couldn't do that with the one in the bathroom. Apart from me, Mr. Doggies always seemed to notice them. Mr. Doggies was our St. Bernard, and one of the reasons why I found it halfway bearable here. Although the mirror in my room was taped up, he sometimes growled at it. To protect me, he now always slept in my room. That was a nice feeling. It also seemed to me that the witch had put some distance between us. Maybe she was afraid of dogs. It was just before Christmas, and I had almost forgotten about the witch. I was sleeping soundly in my bed when a disturbing noise woke me up. It was Mr. Doggies. He was crying. When I realized this, I pushed the covers aside and immediately went down to him on the floor. I wanted to stroke him, but when I touched him, I pulled my hand back. He was so incredibly hot. I had no choice but to wake up my foster parents. They didn't know what was wrong with the dog either. He got hotter and couldn't move. He seemed like he was suffering. My foster father decided to take him to the vet clinic and have him put to sleep. I insisted on coming with him, but I was to regret that. At the vet clinic, Mr. Doggies was so hot that his eyes were just a gooey mess. That and his fur, which had now almost completely fallen out, made the most horrible picture I'd ever seen. And I'd seen a lot. I was so glad when my dear protector finally fell asleep. There was no doubt who had done it. The vet and my foster parents, they couldn't make sense of what had happened to the dog, but I could. The witch had done it, and I would kill her for it. No matter what it cost me, she would suffer just as much as Mr. Doggies had suffered. Over the next few days, I withdrew quite a bit. I had to make plans. My foster parents were constantly trying to encourage me to do something to forget the whole thing. Tanya, Mr. Doggies wouldn't want you to feel so bad, she kept telling me. Mr. Doggies didn't want anything anymore because that damn witch had boiled his brain. Too bad for her, because now I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I hated her. In the Brazilian jiu-jitsu lessons I'd been taking for months, I always had her dead face in front of my eyes and had to be careful not to choke my training colleagues too hard.
Over the next 3 years, I got better and better and was pretty sure that I was capable of killing a person. I would find out if the same applied to the witch. According to the info I had found here about the elevator game, she would eventually take on my appearance and be flesh and blood to take my place. When that happened, I would strike, but I had to wait for that opportunity because something was suddenly happening in this world. I hadn't expected it. Cities all over the country were suddenly sealed off because of some kind of epidemic had broken out. At first, it was just rumors on the internet. Then more and more came to light, and the mainstream media also reported on it. The pandemic changed people. It killed them, but brought them back to life. In addition to the undead, there were other monsters on the streets. Some looked like spiders, some looked like bugs or werewolves. People in our area, including my foster parents, panicked. They were buying supermarkets empty, fighting over crates of water, fighting and sometimes killing each other. The police were still on duty, but they had no time to deal with anything other than the monsters. High-ranking politicians were eaten or infected, and so the government slowly collapsed. Many tried to leave the country, but it was not so easy. Planes stopped flying, and the epidemic had also broken out in neighboring countries. Soon, there was nothing on TV, and the only way to get information was the internet. The advice given there was simple. Don't leave your house. Hide in the cellar with supplies. I rarely saw the witch anymore. She looked more and more like me now. That was good. I would soon get my revenge, even in the midst of the apocalypse. I hadn't forgotten what she'd done. After several weeks without an official government, my foster parents decided it was best to leave the country. We'd already stockpiled a lot of cans of gasoline and canned food, but they thought we should still get firearms. I was against it, but they wouldn't be dissuaded. They told me to get dressed and wait in the garage of our house. They would drive into town in our second car and see what else was available at Barry's gun shop. They took a few canned goods with them as barter items in case he didn't take cash anymore. Even after 10 hours, they weren't back. I decided to wait another day, but I knew they wouldn't be coming back. They were sure to be eaten. Shortly before 24 hours was up, I suddenly heard something in the entrance of the house. At first, I thought my foster parents were back, but that noise sounded more like a burglar. I went out of my room, but before I reached the stairs, downstairs, I stopped. In the corner of my eye, I had seen something that shouldn't be there. I was standing in my parents' bedroom. Of course, it wasn't really me, but it looked just like me, down to the smallest detail. The witch laughed confidently and slowly came out of the room into the hallway. She deliberately blocked the way to the stairs. That way I couldn't escape. I took a quick look down over the banister. If I had jumped down there, I would definitely break something. But that didn't matter because I didn't actually want to get away from her. "What's wrong, girl? Are you scared?" croaked the witch. "No," I replied. Then I took a wrestling step toward her and grabbed her ankle. She hopped awkwardly on one leg and lost her balance when I pushed her backwards with my hand. The witch fell down the stairs but quickly picked herself up again. "That won't save you, girl. You can't beat me," she said. "Maybe not, but that one can," I replied. I pointed my finger at the creature behind her. The witch turned around and saw the disgusting human spider. It immediately pounced on her and bit her shoulder. The witch screamed in pain. Good. I took advantage of the distraction, ran down the stairs, past the two of them. The witch screamed again, and I stopped once more before entering the garage. I saw the spider bite her thighs, stomach, and face. That was satisfying. Then I sprinted into the garage and locked the door behind me. The key to our SUV was hanging next to the door, and I grabbed it. It had an automatic gearbox, and I'd been allowed to drive it a few times on the training ground. After loading all the gas cans, I packed as many cans of food and cases of water as I could into the trunk and back seat. That was certainly enough to get me to my destination. I pressed a button to open the garage door and drove off. I wasn't trying to get to another country. I was going to New York, to a very specific hotel that had a very specific elevator. I was very good at driving. I didn't have to change gear once, and I didn't have to follow the traffic rules either. On the way through the cities, I was amazed at how quickly everything had gone downhill here. There were no more people to be seen for miles around. Every now and then, one of the monsters would cross my path. Apart from the ones I knew, there were also human snakes and bats. They looked even scarier than the spiders, I thought. Every time I saw a monster, I accelerated and drove away. That usually worked quite well. It took me 2 days to get to New York. The city was just as dead as everyone else. Every now and then I heard gunshots and screams in the distance, but that was all. Then I found the hotel. As I looked at it, I thought that I had not only traveled between worlds, but also in time, because while playing the elevator game, we saw a world which the hotel was abandoned and inhabited only by the undead and spiders. Maybe I was up there right now, running through the corridors with Eileen and the others, only to arrive here years before it all happened. That gave me a headache, and I stopped thinking about it. I carefully left the car and went inside. I was glad that the elevator was still working. As Marius had taught me back then, I went through the floors. This time I knew that the witch wouldn't get in on the 5th floor. She was now spider food. When the elevator stopped on the 10th floor at the end of the game, I saw a world that had nothing to do with the hotel. I saw fire, lava, torture, and death. It was hell. I was sure of it. This time I didn't get out and pressed 1. When the doors opened again, I immediately noticed the sunlight. It was my sunlight, not the orange one from the other world. However, my joy only lasted a short time. The reason I was able to enjoy so much of my sunlight was that I was standing outside. The elevator door closed behind me and it disappeared into nowhere. What was once the hotel was now just rubble. But it wasn't just the hotel. The whole of New York was in ruins, far and wide. I couldn't see a single building standing. What the hell happened here? I was home now, but I wasn't safe.
My name is Jake Richards. I took a job out of desperation that now has me doubting my sanity. The best way to tell this story is to start from scratch. My life changed abruptly when I first met the man of peace, and then this other man, this tall man. It all started with me sitting depressed in my apartment. The economy was in crisis, and I was feeling the effects. I was now 52 years old and had been struggling with odd jobs for over 30 years. I didn't have any training. It had always worked well in the past, though. But in times like these, no one would hire an old guy with no training or special skills. I hadn't saved anything either. How could I? My salary was never really lavish, and then everyone wanted a piece of it. The state wanted taxes to finance its stupid wars. The health insurance company wanted a lot of money, and rents become more and more expensive in recent years. You can almost no longer afford to live. To cut a long story short, I was desperate. So I took some of my last dollars and got myself a dozen newspapers. It was hard to believe, but some companies only place their ads in newspapers and not on the websites of the job center, Zing or other providers. I guess they wanted to make sure that the applicant really made an effort and pulled out all the stops to get a job. It took me almost the whole day to read all the jobs from the newspapers and the internet and put them together in a Word file. In the end, I ended up with 124 ads to which I would now apply. Thank goodness almost all of them preferred an application by email. I couldn't have afforded to send 124 applications by mail. Now, my creativity was called for as I applied for a wide variety of jobs: gardening and landscaping helper, waiter, care assistant, office worker, cleaner, even dishwasher were just some of the jobs I tried to get. Luckily, I had taken a course in writing applications a few years ago and still had the sample applications and documents I created for myself on a USB memory stick, so I just had to adapt them to various job ads, and that's what I did.
for all 124 job offers. It took me almost 2 days, but in the end, I was proud of my work and was sure that it would lead me to success. So I sent off all the emails and letters and waited for positive news. Now, in the meantime, my situation became more and more complicated. My landlord came by for a visit and told me that due to the economic crisis, he now always needed the rent on the first of the month and could no longer grant me any deferrals or wait time. I couldn't blame him. It was clear that he was dependent on the money himself, and on top of that, my account was seized because I hadn't paid an invoice for $239 for a rental car and had ignored the reminders. But that didn't matter. With my new job, I could easily pay $240 and my account would no longer have been seized. It took more than a few days before the first rejection arrived. It wasn't motivating, but it was part of the job. I knew that. Then I received another rejection by email. And another. After 4 weeks, I had 103 rejections. The remaining companies didn't even bother to get back to me, and when I asked, I was told they'd chosen someone else. That couldn't be right. I made no demands on my new job. I didn't care about the hours. I didn't even care about the pay as long as I could pay my bills. I just wanted to fucking live. Out of sheer anger, I crumpled up the newspapers and was about to throw them all away when something caught my eye. It was a smiley face I had drawn in highlighter next to an advertisement. It was one of the few I hadn't applied for. To be honest, I didn't even take it seriously and just smiled about it. I read it again, though, now to decide whether I should apply after all. The text of the ad read as follows. Heidewitzka, watch out. Are you ready to travel, even to another world? Can you do simple tasks and maintain discretion? Then you work for hell. With us, it's warmer than in heaven. Applications by email to mandisfriedensen69@gmail.com. Maybe it was all just clever marketing, right? It certainly wasn't the devil himself who was looking for reinforcements in hell. It could be that this company made ovens or something similar. I should just send an email with a short application and see what's happening. The very next morning, I had a reply in my inbox, and it was one that made me damn happy. Your passionate application enchants my soul, Mr. Richards. I would like to invite you for an interview. 3 hours after you read this email, come to 41 Blaker Street, room 66 on the 4th floor. It will be worth your while. Even though the first part of the text was certainly meant sarcastically, I was incredibly happy to even have finally been invited for an interview. I wondered how the person would know when I read the email, though, but I didn't care. Immediately after reading the good news, I ironed my best suit and took a long shower. I had neglected showering in the last few weeks, but that was over now. New job, new me. Then I set off straight away. I didn't want to be late. Blaker Street was about a 20-minute walk from me, which would definitely be a pleasant commute. The whole area looked even more run down than the street I lived on. I thought to myself, old apartment buildings that were empty and sprayed with graffiti, warehouses and bus stops that were probably no longer used. When I arrived in front of 41, I had to pull myself together. All hope suddenly disappeared from my heart as I was standing in front of an abandoned factory building. Apparently, someone had played a joke on me. As if in a trance, I still walked through the front doors and the front entrance, although they really didn't have doors anymore. I didn't know what else to do. So I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor and thought to myself that maybe I could throw myself off the roof and the whole misery would be over. Wouldn't hurt to visit 66 again first. The corridor on the 4th floor was filthy, full of syringes, puke, and garbage. Room 66 was the only one that was closed with a metal door. A large X was scratched into the floor in front of the door, and it said, "Knock here." Was someone from HR supposed to be here after all? Maybe they wanted to reopen the factory. That would create a lot of jobs, and not just for me. But without too much hope, I knocked and was surprised at the noise I made. It didn't sound as if I was knocking on a metal door, but on wood. Come in. Somehow I got dizzy or something. I felt like I was falling forward and stumbled. When I looked up again, I was actually standing in an office. Only it didn't look like a factory. The walls were made of bare stone. There were tapestries, old paintings, and a big old desk with a burning candle on it. The man sitting at the desk put down his smartphone and stood up. "Mr. Richards, it's a pleasure to meet you. Please take a seat," he said. The man had black, back-combed hair and piercing green eyes. He was wearing blue jeans and a black shirt. He had a badge on his chest with that smiley face on it that said Team Peace. Maybe he was an environmental activist or something. Anyway, I sat down and was curious to see what kind of job he had to offer. "I see you've admired my badge, Mr. Richards. If you work for us, you'll get your own, of course. Peace is our business, you know." "How do you achieve peace, you ask?" "With progress." "How do you achieve progress?" "With science. We have made such progress with our scientific experiments over the last 100 years that we now have to move to a larger test facility. In such a large test facility, there's a lot of work involved that has to be done in addition to the experiments. Waste has to be disposed of. The facility has to become clean. Light bulbs have to be changed and the like. To make a long story short, Mr. Richards, we need a janitor," he said. "So, a janitor job. That sounded good." He told me more about the work and that I would have to get used to the fact that things work differently than in other companies there. I didn't know what he meant by that, but it certainly wouldn't be a problem for me. So he gave me the contract, which I was supposed to read at home. If I accepted the offer, I was to contact him by email the next day and could start working the following day. Damn, that sounded good. When we said goodbye, I asked him what his name was, and he said names weren't that important. He was simply the man of peace. It took a bit of getting used to, but that shouldn't be a problem. As I left the room, I felt like I was falling again and got dizzy. When I turned around, the metal door was locked, and something strange was happening here. But I could live with that because the man of peace, he seemed nice. Later that evening, I read the contract and almost spit my coffee on it when I saw the salary. It said $4,000 a month in advance with the possibility of payment in gold or diamonds. $4,000 in advance? I'd scrub the torture chamber of hell for $4,000. The rest of the contract was a bit strangely worded, but it was actually a very ordinary employment contract. Only on the last page was something, relatively unusual. It said, "The safety and integrity of your body and your immortal soul is only guaranteed if you adhere to the following rules. 1. Do not talk to the test subjects. 2. Never let a test subject out of his room. 3. Be punctual as far as possible. 4. Be discreet and do not talk to anyone about your work. 5. Be friendly and greet other employees. Hail Lucifer." Hail Lucifer? Not with the test objects to speak? Were they experimenting on people? Well, it was possible that it was a medical study with volunteers who were well paid. I quickly forgot my doubts because this figure was still buzzing around in my head, $4,000. Actually, there was no question about it. I would sign. The next morning, I wrote another email to mandisfriendison69@gmail.com saying I'd accept and that I was looking forward to my first day at work tomorrow. Just a few seconds later, I received a reply. The man could really type fast, it seemed. The email said, "Welcome to Team Peace, Mr. Richards. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Please join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. local time in your world in room 69 in the 4th floor of the building, on Bleecker Street. We look forward to seeing you." 9 a.m. was perfect, so I could sleep in. Freshly showered, shaved, and full of energy, I stood in front of room number 69 at 10 to 9 the next day. There was also an X carved on the floor. On the door, it said, "Employees only." Then I was in the right place. I tried to open it, but it was locked. Confused, I knocked and had to wait almost a half a minute for an answer. However, the voice didn't sound like the man of peace, but like that of a little boy. I felt dizzy again and fell forward. This time I was sure that the door hadn't opened, and yet I was now standing in the middle of the room. In front of me stood a little boy. He greeted me and introduced himself as Lucas. He was the junior vice president of operations and would be briefing me today. First, I got my Team Peace badge and was told that the Team Peace t-shirts, one of which he was wearing, were unfortunately not being delivered at the moment. Then came the best part. I got the $4,000 cash in hand, paid in advance. My hands were shaking while Lucas showed me my locker where I could leave my money and put on my work clothes. After I'd slipped into my overalls, I realized that this wasn't actually possible here. I had gone into a room that could only be, 20 by 20 at most. There should have been air behind the back wall of the room because that's where the building ended, but it didn't. There was a door that led into the testing facility. There were several long corridors with rooms or cells behind them, and there was something else. If you looked out the window, you could see that you were on the first floor. But until then, just now, we were still on the fourth floor. How is that possible? We hadn't walked up any stairs or taken an elevator. What's more, the sun outside was a reddish orange and a little darker than it had been minutes ago. I didn't have time to think about it, though, because Lucas showed me around and listed my tasks: mopping the floor of the corridors, cleaning the empty cells, taking out the garbage, changing any light bulbs, and cleaning the office of the man of peace. This was at the end of the long corridors. We visited him briefly, but he was on the phone. In the corner of the room, someone else was standing there. It was a huge, muscular guy with pale skin. He was wearing a nurse's outfit and had a paper bag over his head. I remembered the rules from the contract and greeted him. The muscle man raised his hand and nodded to me, or so it seemed. When we went out again, Lucas introduced him to me as Festus. He was the head nurse here and a valued member of staff. Then he showed me the toilets, which of course needed to be cleaned. When I said that the building was bigger than I had imagined, Lucas told me that they had previously worked in the neighborhood where Festus came from, but there had been too much trouble with the authorities. This would be a much quieter place to work. I didn't even want to know which neighborhood Festus came from, so I decided just to get to work. The corridors were easy to clean with the excellent equipment I had at my disposal. I even had a lot of fun doing it. I also cleaned the office of the man of peace thoroughly. At first, I wanted to come back later because he was on the phone again, but he said that wasn't a problem. He really seemed to trust me, which was a nice feeling. I don't know who he was talking to on the phone, but the conversation, it didn't make sense to me. It was about people in a place called Tarusa, a man called Belal, and a lot of other crazy stuff. So my first day at work went relatively well, and I went home happy with $4,000. If I followed Lucas's instructions to go back out the door I'd come from, I'd end up back on the fourth floor hallway at 41 Blaker Street. I realized by now that the whole thing wasn't normal, but I didn't care at all. With the $4,000 in my hand, I went straight to my landlord and paid the rent for the coming month. Then I ordered Chinese food and some clothes from Amazon. Life immediately felt much better. Little did I know that everything would be taking a dark turn. The Mothman. By the next day, I'd gotten used to the strange transitions, but I didn't want to think about the fact that I was in a different world. Sometimes it's better to just get on with things without worrying too much. I cleaned the corridors and took out the garbage, and when I did that, I also got the confirmation that I wasn't really in Blaker Street anymore because the terrain outside was completely different. We were on a kind of a small mountain, cut off from the rest of the world. I ignored that too, and carried on with my work. While cleaning one of the last corridors, I noticed some strange noises coming from one of the rooms. It sounded like a whirring. I couldn't describe it exactly. Anyway, my curiosity got the better of me, and I looked through the small barred window by the door. It was dark in the cell. In one corner, I saw a bed and a wash basin. In the other corner, there was something hanging on the wall. At first, I thought it was just a strange cupboard, but then my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I was startled. Hanging on the wall was a huge moth. The monster was easily as big as a full-grown man. Then I saw why it was so big. The moth was wearing boxer shorts. It was as big as a full-grown man because it was actually a man. The legs still looked human, as did parts of the head, but the back was covered with a kind of fur and had huge moth wings. One half of the face was human, the other half looked like an insect, including a huge insect eye. What a gruesome sight. The moth suddenly turned to me and then flew toward the door. I was startled again, fell onto the seat of my pants. Festus, who I hadn't even noticed, tapped me on the shoulder and gave me a thumbs up. As weird as that sounded, it helped me to process the horror I had just seen. What had happened to this man? Was he so bad and they tried to cure him, or was he one of the Man of Peace's experiments? The fate of the Mothman preoccupied me for the next few days. I'd taken this job without asking questions about what kind of experiments were going on here. Did that make me a bad person? Even an accomplice? I didn't know. I didn't even know whether the experiments were harming the test subjects or whether they had volunteered. Honestly, it was none of my business. I was only the janitor. I mean, the military also needed a janitor, so was he responsible for millions of people dying in wars? I didn't think he was. Then there was the point that I had no choice with this job. I was finally somebody again. I had enough money to support myself, to dress nicely, to go out and eat, and buy myself a small car. Without this job, I was broke and on the verge of taking my own life. I felt I had the right to my life and decided to just work hard and stay out of the other things. And that's what I did. About a week later, the Mothman's cell was empty, and I had to clean it. It smelled pretty disgusting in there. The floor in the middle of the room, directly under the lamp, looked burnt. And there were some remains stuck there. Apparently the moth had gone up in flames. Lucas gave me the task of driving down to the city and ordering 100 fireproof blankets. Apparently the Mothman had lit a fire with the help of his blanket and sparks. Moths were addicted to light. I had terrible nightmares at night, and of course I was aware of where they came from. Without realizing it, I had plunged into a dark world of horror and unimaginable horror, and had accepted it as my normality. The Mothman had committed suicide and was now history. But he was only the beginning. The dead woman. Over the next few days, I got more and more used to my new job and also to the people. The Man of Peace and Festus were particularly nice. Lucas was nice too, but somehow I didn't quite trust him. While cleaning the office, the Man of Peace phoned again.
Listen, decent work takes time. We're the best you've got. What's your great lab doing on Haven's Rock? They're not even scratching the surface. We're the ones who'll provide you with an army like no other soon enough. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's all right. No problem. I'll see you around. So that's what this was all about. They wanted to breed an army. I told myself it was a similar program to Captain America's Super Soldier program. Deep down, I knew that wasn't true, but it worked for me. I had just decided to go for the money. After all, my conscience didn't pay the bills. Normally, I stayed away from the cells, except for the ones I had to clean, of course. But one cell caught my attention. I heard a moan as I walked past. Woman moaning. Sexy. It sounded like a woman moaning. What can I say? I was a very simple man. I just wanted to take a look inside and see what was going on.
Like a moth to a flame, I looked through the small window with the bars, and I immediately realized that the woman had not moaned out of lust. A large piece of metal, probably part of a car, was stuck deep into her chest. When she saw me, she moaned again and jumped toward the door. Moaning zombie. I took a step back, but this gave me a better view of the woman. Her skin was pale and her eyes white. The blood from the large wound in her chest had long since clotted. I took a look at her file next to the door. It wasn't forbidden, otherwise it wouldn't have been in my contract. The woman's name was Louisa Gringer. There was also an official report from the New York Police Department. The woman had been in a car accident with a drunk guy. Her heart was pierced by a piece of metal. The woman was dead. That could also be seen in the pictures of her lying in the morgue. How could it be that this dead woman was now standing in front of me, pacing around her cell and moaning? Had the man of peace really found a cure for death? That was sensational. What a breakthrough in medicine. Over the next few days, I kept glancing into her cell and changed my mind. And changed my opinion quickly. She sometimes walked against the worn and gaze and showed there was still some kind of intelligence in her, but she couldn't understand her own existence. What a terrible way to eke out a life. I wondered if she could feel pain. If so, it had to be unbearable. Her body was half rotten, her blood was clotting in her veins, and that piece of metal was still stuck in her heart. I could no longer help the poor thing. But maybe her neighbor. He was new in the cell, and I heard him crying. It sounded like he was just a little boy. I knew I was breaking the rules, but I couldn't help it. After all, it was a child. I couldn't see into the cell because there was a towel hanging outside the window, but the boy answered when I called him. He pleaded. I didn't even ask for help. I just asked what he wanted. I said, I just wanted to know if he was okay. Was there no place for this little boy? What he said now shocked me. He was no longer a little boy. He was much older than me, and if I wanted to keep my life, I should stay away from him and his brother. When I asked him who his brother was, he told me it was Lucas. I knew there was something wrong with him. The next day I went to the man of peace and confessed. I'd hoped he wouldn't fire me. He calmly explained to me that Noah, the boy's name, was not a simple test subject after all. He was part of the family and a guest, but that didn't apply to the other cells. I assured him that I would stick to it and made my way to the cellar. I'd never been there before, but once in the cellar, I was supposed to mop the floor there. On the way, I passed Noah's cell, and instead of a cry, all I heard was a terrifying growl. In the basement, there was a single cell next to several generators and pipes. Unlike the others, the door was locked with several chains, and some strange signs were painted around it. I wondered if they were there to keep the prisoner inside. I wanted to concentrate on my work, but then I heard something. Playbox. Playbox? It sounded like a melody from one of those old speakers, but where did it come from? It had sounded as if the melody had come from directly behind me, but that wasn't possible. I was startled again because I heard something. Little girl laugh. The laughter came from the cell and was clearly coming from a little girl. He had caught more children here? The money was all well and good, but I just couldn't ignore experiments on children. I went to the cell door and asked the little girl if she was okay. After all, I felt kind of funny. It wasn't until I was back upstairs on the first floor that I really came to. Maybe I had inhaled some toxic stuff. Dazed, I went home after my shift. I took a hot shower and sat down in front of my new flat-screen TV. However, I didn't get around to switching it on because the storm suddenly cut the power out. I was frantically searching for my cell phone in the dark when I heard the little girl's laughter again. Damn. There must have been a good reason why you shouldn't talk to the test subjects. Then I heard another scary noise. It was coming from my bathroom. Singing. It sounded like someone was singing in there. I plucked up all my courage and headed to the bathroom door. At least I had some light with my cell phone. I pushed the door open with a jolt, but there was no one to be seen. However, there was water in the bathtub, as if someone had taken a bath. I wanted to pull the plug, but it didn't happen. It was too late. I saw her in the water, a ghostly woman with black eyes. It was the used Festus who grabbed me by the shoulder and pulled me away from her. It turned out that a ghost who was in the service of the man of peace had followed me home. Lucas and Festus had locked him up again, and I had to attend a training session and assure them that I would take better care of myself in the future. I can assure you that I did, but it didn't help much. The ghost was not going to be the darkest creature I would encounter in that basement. A few weeks later, I was mopping the basement again when I noticed a room that was open. I thought it might be a cell that wasn't being used at that moment, so I went in to clean it. I was wrong. The cell was in use. In its center was a table or altar made of stone. A man was lying on it. A tall man. He looked old and wore a suit smeared with dirt. It looked as if someone had dug up a corpse and laid it out here. That was quite possible, considering the experiments the man of peace was conducting. Somehow, though, it seemed to me that this tall man had some kind of aura? A cold, evil aura. He was different from the walking corpses I had seen so far. I didn't want to have anything to do with him, and I wanted to keep the agreement I had made with the man of peace. As I was about to open the door again to go out, I heard something. It was a kind of whisper. Was it coming from the dead tall man? Then perhaps the experiment had already begun. I looked behind me, but I couldn't see any movement from the big man. He lay rigidly on his altar, his dead eyes fixed on the ceiling, but I was sure that he had whispered. Maybe not with my mouth, but somehow his words had gotten into my head. I heard them again. Hunger. Hunger. I ran out of the room and slammed the door behind me. You would have thought it was an undead that just wanted to eat some brains, but somehow I knew it wasn't. He was something else. I had to tell the man of peace about it. So I went into his office and entered after knocking. "Ah, Mr. Richards, how's the work going?" asked the man of peace. "Oh, wonderful, sir, wonderful. I just wanted to let you know that I've come across something in the cellar again, and after the debacle last time, I wanted to let you know right away." "Very good, Mr. Richards. That's exactly what I expect from you. What's been going on? Has Itia, our water spirit, been bothering you again?" he asked. "No, sir. As you probably know, there's a man lying on a stone table, some tall man. I went in because the door was open and I was mopping up and I saw him. I don't know if their experiments have started yet." "Experiments? Oh, Mr. Richards, this isn't just some big man. It's one of the tall men, one of the first creatures of creation. While God created the archangels, someone else created the tall men. You go ahead and mop the room, but don't touch the big man. He is very valuable to our operation." "Of course not, sir. I wouldn't touch him voluntarily, but I wanted to tell you that he spoke to me in my head. He said he was hungry, and before something like what happened last time, I thought—" The man of peace stood up from his desk. He seemed genuinely surprised. "He told you he was hungry?" "Mr. Richards, that's fantastic. We've been waiting a long time for him to wake up. I found him a little over 1,000 years ago, locked up and buried in a coffin. That was a punishment for the crimes against nature committed by him and the other tall men. The tall men are very important to the princes of hell. Only they can complete an important task that must be done to usher in the apocalypse. His awakening is extremely good news. Well, it's good news for me, but not for them. He has chosen her to help him. He wants to regain his strength. You have to feed him. That can be very unpleasant, but I'm afraid they have no choice. If they don't feed him, he will eat them, and I won't be able to help them. I was dreading what I would have to feed the big man. What was that crime against nature the big men committed, sir? Did they kill anyone? I asked. Yes, Mr. Richards. You killed God. My small human brain did not understand the biblical implications of this monstrous crime. I had to concentrate on my new task now anyway. It was time to feed the big man.
My name is Jamal, and I'm 13 years old. I was willing to do anything to protect my family, and that didn't change when I met him. I lived with my mother and sister in New Canton. It was now 4 years since my father was shot to death as a bystander in a shootout between the police and the OASIS cartel. My older brother didn't fare much better. A couple of guys from the Black Ridge gang had robbed a liquor store and fled the scene in their old Ford. Either they didn't see my brother or they didn't care about him. In any case, they killed him. Right there, hit him, and he died lying in the street, long before an ambulance was in sight. I was 6 years old when this happened, and today I can't even remember his voice. When I was 11 years old, I simply stopped going to school. I just couldn't stand it there anymore. School was one big battlefield. Every day there were fights, knife attacks, drug deals. None of the teachers inspired or motivated their students. It was clear to them that we would soon end up on the streets and nothing would become of us. This was simply due to the situation in New Canton. There was hardly any work here, hardly any prospects of a decent life, especially not for people like me from the Bowtown neighborhood. Neither the school nor the authorities were interested in my absence from school. Nobody cared. My mother didn't like it, but she was too drunk to look after me. She wasn't always like that. I guess all the blows of fate got to her. So, of course, it wasn't long before I joined the gang. They called themselves the Knights of the Hood, and they cultivated this image. With the money they earned, they built a youth center and organized a party at the retirement home. Of course, they didn't tell anyone that the money came from drug deals and robberies. At first, I was given small jobs like stealing whiskey and stuff. After I proved myself to be loyal and trustworthy, they introduced me to the drug business. I was finally able to earn some money to support my mother. And it turned out they hadn't built the youth center without ulterior motives, because it was the headquarters of their drug operation, so to speak. My job was to play pool. I played all day at the table at the back left, even though I was terrible. When someone came to my table and placed a certain amount of money on it, apparently to challenge me, I dropped a small bag into the corner of the table. The customer took it out of the pocket inconspicuously, and I pocketed the money. It went pretty well, and it didn't look suspicious to the outside world, and I earned $30 a day and was able to help my mother pay the rent. She knew that the money had come from illegal transactions, but she needed it too much not to accept it. The fact that I could go and help her pay the rent made me quite proud, and I felt good. But I was soon to get to know the dark side of the business. Maurice, the guy he was sort of my boss in the drug business, told me that a boy my age often stood outside the youth center and sold his own stuff. And we couldn't tolerate that, and it was my job to teach him a lesson. When I asked him, well, how should I teach him a lesson? Maurice clearly told me that the best thing to do would be to kill him, or at least beat him up and send him to the hospital. I didn't really want to have anything to do with that, but according to Maurice, well, I had no choice. If I refused, I would be considered a traitor, and the family of a traitor would no longer be safe, he said. Well, I couldn't let anything happen to my mother or even my little sister. We were all broken in some way, but my little sister Lily was different. She was pure and innocent. She was the best in her class at elementary school, and with luck might have a better life ahead of her than the rest of us.
The guy outside, he was taller and more muscular than me, and, well, so I had to think of something. I filled a sock with a load of my sister's marbles and made myself a deadly club. I hid it in my jacket pocket the next day as I walked out of the center and towards our rival. "What do you want, boy? Go back inside and play with your balls," he said arrogantly. When I hit him in the face with that bag of marbles, I not only saw the blood spatter, but also 2 of his teeth fall to the ground. The boy fell to the ground in a daze and was defenseless. But that probably wasn't enough to send him to the hospital, so I hit him again and again and again. It was a strange feeling. I had somehow lost control of myself. Was it the adrenaline? When I saw something sharp and white sticking out through his bloody cheek, I stopped. It was part of his shattered cheekbone. The boy's face was bloody and swollen. He was spitting out blood out of his mouth. He could hardly breathe. His nose is all smashed and broken. Breathing through that was no longer an option. As Maurice had told me, I made sure that no one had seen me, and then I left. Even when I was sitting in my room at home, well, I saw the face I had destroyed in front of me. What had I done? I took the marbles out of my death club and burned the sock, as Maurice had explained to me, when I saw that even the marbles were stained with his blood. Was he perhaps about to choke on his own blood? Then I was now a murderer. Disgusted with myself and terrified of what I had become, I lay down in bed and cried. I didn't have much time to mourn my own soul because tomorrow, well, business had to go on. And so I carried on doing my thing with the billiards. Maurice and the other guys were happy with me. I was just as happy with the money I was earning until the day I got that terrible phone call. So I was in town and I had just bought a Coke at the store when I was stopped by the police. Already knew Officer Meyer and Officer Milton. It wasn't the first time I'd had problems with them. The absurd thing was they didn't even know that I was dealing drugs in the youth center. This time they stopped me with their blue lights flashing and stepped out of their patrol car because they thought my shoes were suspicious. Someone like me couldn't afford Air Jordans, said Milton. My mother had given them to me for my birthday, but they weren't interested. As usual, they searched me and found nothing. Before they let me go, Meyer told me that it made him angry that his son had to go to school with people like me. Just when I thought I had the worst part of what was actually a nice sunny day done, the real bad part came. My mother called, and when I answered the phone, I could barely understand what she was saying. She was crying. My little sister had cancer. I didn't understand much about it, but it was apparently an aggressive type that was about to burn itself out. There was a new experimental treatment with a good chance of success, but as we didn't have health insurance, we couldn't afford it. Lily, my little sister, was going to die. She would die even though the doctors could care for her. I hated this sick, stingy world where it was all about money. The treatment lasted almost 4 weeks and cost $1,200 a day. Man, that was a lot of money. But maybe there was a chance. I had proven myself loyal for 2 years now. Maybe there was a job for me in the gang that would let me earn enough. I went to Maurice and told him that I needed $50,000 and if there was a way to earn it. He laughed and he said he'd never seen that kind of money. Now, he wanted to know if I was in any trouble, if someone's dead or someone was blackmailing me. I tearfully told him about my sister, her illness, and that she would be dead in 6 months at the latest. Apparently, he had once lost someone to cancer himself and felt sorry for me. There's something, but I'll be honest, that wouldn't be a job like the Knights of the Hood. If you work for this guy, you're going to have to do some sick shit. Selling drugs or beating someone up seems totally normal to you. We got him some stuff once, and that was borderline. I can tell you where you can find it, but mark my words, you'll regret it, said Maurice. It didn't matter to me. As long as I could help my sister, I was prepared to do anything. I myself was lost, and I knew that since I had beaten that boy almost to death in front of the center, I was going nowhere. But my sister had a future. I firmly believed that. Maurice gave me an address and said I had to show up there between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. I shouldn't be surprised. Everyone gets dizzy the first time. I didn't know what he meant by that, but that very night I made my way to the building where I was supposed to find the man. I rode my bike to number 51 on Old Trevor Road and ended up standing in front of an abandoned store. Now, there were a lot of them in New Canton, and some of them were used for shady businesses, so I wasn't surprised. Of course, the door wasn't locked, so I went inside. There was no one in the store. Old cans, empty shelves, and a cash register that had long since been emptied. But something here was different. I felt something deep in my guts. I guess it could best be described as a vibration. It got stronger as I walked toward the door to the back room, on which someone had written management with a felt-tip pen. Well, it didn't look professional, although I began to doubt whether I could really earn that much money here, so I knocked. I mean, what did I have to lose? "Come in," someone called. As the door opened, I briefly felt like I was going to fall. I staggered but managed to stay standing, and when I looked up again, I was standing in an old-fashioned office. A middle-aged guy was sitting at the desk. He was wearing a black shirt, had slicked black hair, and piercing green eyes. On his shirt, he wore a funny badge with a smiley face that said Team Peace. "Good evening, young man. How may I help you?" asked the strange man. "Maurice said that you might have work for me, work that earns a lot of money," I said bluntly. "Well, you don't seem to have any manners. You always want to work. That's something. I remember Maurice. Did he also tell you that my work can be very special?" he asked. "Yes, sir, he did. I'm ready to do anything, and I won't ask any questions," I replied. "Oh, I doubt that. You're sure to ask some questions. I just hope they'll be the right ones. You're in luck. I could use someone right now. My last trainee, Lucas, did so well that now he has a job in management as my deputy. Do well, too, and you'll be rewarded." "What's your name?" he wanted to know. "Jamal, sir. May I also ask what is yours?" "I'm the man of peace. The name says it all. But you'll see, Jamal. Go home now. You'll get a package from me tomorrow with instructions. Don't worry. I'll find out your address myself. Now get out of here. Shoo, shoo." "Yes, sir. Thank you very much. One more thing. Tell me, why do you want to work for me?" Lucas wanted to, but he's different from you. "About my sister, sir. She has cancer, and I need to raise money for her treatment." The man of peace suddenly seemed to be suffering from a headache because he grabbed his temple. "Is everything all right, sir?" I asked. Yes, now go, please," he said. So I did. The door somehow looked different from the inside than from the outside, but I didn't care either. And then I felt dizzy again, but I managed to stop myself from falling. There was something strange about this door. When I woke up the next day and saw how the sun was shining again today in its most wonderful orange-red hue, I almost forgot that my little sister was terminally ill. Around noon, my mother called me because there was a package for me on our doorstep. It had to be from the man of peace. Very good. I took it back to my room and opened it. There was a letter on top, which I read first. "Dear Jamal, you little rascal, you are now officially a member of Team Peace. As a sign that you belong, you now have an official Team Peace badge. I ask you to wear it all times of the day and night. You now have a new job at the New Canton Senior Center. You are officially listed there as a care assistant. Don't worry, you don't have to do anything disgusting like wiping butts. Your job is even more disgusting. There's a small animal in a little test tube. Your job is to make sure that it crawls up the nose of Miss Calber from room 303. Did you understand that? It has to be the nose, not the mouth, not the damn butt, but the critter has to go up the nose. Then watch the patient for half an hour and report back to me. Miss Calber is severely demented and confined to her bed, so you should encounter little resistance. Nevertheless, you shouldn't go to her until after midnight. I don't trust every member of the staff there. Now please eat this note. See you later." What kind of sick shit had I gotten myself into? Without giving it much thought, I ate the damn note. In the package, I also found a nurse's uniform with my name on it and even an employee ID card. As instructed, I put on the team piece badge and felt kind of silly, but that didn't matter. At the bottom of the small package, I found the test tube. There was a little green spider crawling around in it. That was disgusting. How was I supposed to get it to crawl up the old woman's nose? And what was it good for anyway? But these were all the things I could worry about later. There was still some time before nightfall, and time was very precious to me now. I went over to my little sister, who was so happy to see me, and spent the whole day with her. I didn't know how many of them we had left. Around 11:30 p.m., when my mother and sister were already asleep, I got ready for work. It somehow felt good to wear this uniform. It somehow no longer felt worthless. I was somebody, even though I wasn't a proper nurse. Who knows? If things had gone a little differently, I might have actually had a job where I could help people instead of poisoning them with weird spiders. Thanks to my employee ID card, I got into the building without any problems. I took a quick look at the map and saw that I was in room 303 on the 3rd floor. That's where I'm going. I took the elevator up and then looked for Miss Caliber's room. A stocky, short orderly came toward me and scrutinized me. Damn. It must have seemed strange to him that a young guy like me was still on duty so late. He was about to say something when he noticed my team peace badge. Only now did I see that he was wearing one too. He nodded respectfully and walked on. Wow. Maybe the man of peace was more powerful than I thought. Shortly afterwards, I found room 303 and went in. Miss Caliber was awake and tossing her head back and forth. She had me right there staring at her. I quickly took the test tube from the bag and walked over to her. Albert, is that you? I can't see. Are you there, my darling? She asked anxiously. Damn, that was harder than I thought. Yes, I'm here. Everything will be fine. I've got some medicine for you, I replied. Oh, that's sweet of you, Albert. I'm so scared, you know. I'm sorry. I opened the test tube directly above her upper lip, and the spider crawled straight up her nose. Thank goodness for that. I didn't know what I would have done if it had crawled into her mouth. Now I sat down on the chair next to the bed and was ready to type something into the note app on my smartphone. After just a few seconds, Miss Caliber, she started twitching, but differently than before. Her face was contorted. She seemed to be in terrible pain. Then there was quiet, and suddenly she started making strange clicking noises. The noises sounded inhuman. I didn't even know how she made them. Since it was dark, I couldn't see clearly, but something was happening to her eyes. I could have got closer, but I didn't dare. Now I can hear him. The man. Yes, I'm waiting. Well, then she rolled and seemed to be asleep. After the half hour was up, I put the test tube in my rucksack and got on my bike outside. I tried with all my might not to think about what I had just done to a poor, helpless old woman. It was quite a distance from the retirement home to the store, and I really hoped it was worth it. I arrived at 2:15, went into the deserted store, and knocked on the door. Come in, called the man of peace. I was less dizzy this time, but that didn't really improve my mood. Did everything go according to plan, young man? He asked. Yes, sir, everything went as planned, I replied. What did you observe? I took out my cell phone and read him my notes. At first, the patient seemed to be in pain, sir. Then she started making noises. They sounded like a click. She twitched and seemed to be in further pain. And then when she calmed down, she said she could hear the man now. That was probably nonsense. She called me Albert before, too, I told him. Oh, no, that wasn't nonsense. That went better than expected. I'm delighted. We've already had a few test runs with the spiders, but this time they're ready for the grand finale. You helped me a lot, Jamal. Come back in 2 days. There'll be more to do then. And don't forget your payment, said the man of peace. He handed me a small bag. I said goodbye and walked out. I heard it jingle somehow, if it was like a bag of coins. I certainly wouldn't be able to pay for my sister's treatment with it. Outside, on my bike, I opened the bag, and what I saw in the light of the lantern shocked me. It was diamonds. A whole lot of diamonds. The next day, I took them to Maurice, who wanted to know straight away if I had done anything without the gang. When I told him I had the diamonds from the Man of Peace, he immediately accepted it without asking any more questions. He took me to Kenneth, the fence who sold the gems for the Knights of the Hood. He estimated the value of the stones was just over $25,000 and was able to give me $15,000 in cash. Yes, that was it. So I could easily pay for my sister's treatment. I took the money to my mother, who wanted to know if I had robbed anyone. Even when I swore to her several times that I had worked for it, she didn't believe me. Nevertheless, she took it and immediately drove to the clinic with my sister. Her treatment could finally begin. If it meant I could save my sister, I was prepared to shove a stupid spider up the nose of every old person in the whole country. But that wasn't to happen for a while. When I knocked on the office again at the desired time and entered, the Man of Peace had another task for me. Mr. Applebaum died today at the retirement home. Sad, isn't it? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very sad. His family loved Mr. Applebaum very much, and despite his advanced age, they miss him terribly. What do you say we bring him back to life? He asked. And we can do that, sir? But nothing could be easier. The elixir I'm about to give you works wonders. You have to pour it into his mouth and make sure you don't spill any. Also, make sure you don't get any of it on your skin, as it could cause irritation. Afterwards, don't watch him. But wait until he gets up. Don't be afraid, he won't hurt you. His feeding instinct is suppressed for now. He will wander far away. You just have to open the door for him. Great. So he's going to get up and get out? I should create a walking dead man? I took the elixir, put on my uniform, and set off on my bike to the retirement home. According to the Man of Peace, the dead man was in a special room in the basement. I took the elevator down and searched in vain for a light switch. As the whole thing wasn't scary enough, I only had the light from my cell phone to help me. After a few minutes, I found the room and slowly entered. The dead man was lying on a stretcher. I found it kind of disturbing how his jaw was kind of folded down. Nevertheless, it made my job easier. I moved closer to him and noticed the smell of decomposition settling in. I carefully poured the green elixir from the test tube into his mouth and immediately stepped back a few meters. Even though I wanted to run away immediately, I couldn't. I had to make sure he really got up. After about 45 minutes, his arm suddenly fell off the table. I was startled, but thought, well, maybe it's normal. Then one of his legs twitched, and finally the dead man started to gasp. I couldn't believe my eyes when Mr. Applebaum stood up from the stretcher and looked at me hungrily. Even though the Man of Peace had assured me he wouldn't eat me. Perhaps Mr. Applebaum saw it differently. Then he suddenly seemed to look at my Team Peace badge and stood still. That must have been my mission. I opened the door out of the room for him and then the door out into the alley where the garbage cans were. Rattling, he stumbled out and wandered toward his destination, whatever that was. I had just seen a real undead. Still, my working day wasn't over yet. I cycled to the Man of Peace and reported back to him. He was very pleased and handed me another bag as a reward. Outside, I saw this time it was gold. Kenneth was able to turn this into money for me the next day, and I paid the $11,000 directly into my mother's account. The employee at the counter looked at me suspiciously, but after all, there was no law against wealth. And so it went. Day after day, I resurrected the undead for him, put spiders or sometimes a small beetle up other people's noses. I was now earning enough money to soon have paid for my sister's treatment in full. That was a great feeling. My mother was at the clinic with her, and I hadn't seen or spoken to them for weeks because I was working so much, but it was worth it. When almost a month had passed, I had just left another undead for the man of peace from the retirement home when my mother called me. It was just after 1 a.m. What did she want from me? She was probably drunk again. Nevertheless, I answered the phone and pretended to be asleep. "Yeah, what is it, Mom? It's late." "Jamal, please come to the hospital immediately. Quickly." "To the hospital? Why? Do you want me to pick you up? I have money. I can also send you a cab." "Is Lily well again?" I asked. "No, Jamal. The treatment didn't work for your sister. She's dying. She probably won't survive the night. Please come quickly. She really wants to see you again." My stomach suddenly felt so empty. My whole body felt empty. When she was diagnosed with cancer, I knew she could die, but I had hope. I could still do something. There were options. When you get a call like that and you know that there are no more options and no more hope, it pulls the rug right out from under you. She wanted to see me one more time, so she knew she was dying. This world is so unfair. Why did a lovely 6-year-old girl get cancer? It wasn't fair. I had to get on to the driving. I wanted to get on my bike and ride to the clinic, but my legs literally felt like jelly. I didn't want this. I didn't want my sister to die. She didn't deserve that. She shouldn't be lying in a room like that tomorrow morning, like Mr. Applebaum. Then I thought of something. Maybe I didn't have to bury her at all. After all, I'd brought a dozen people back from the dead in the last few weeks. Yes, instead of going to the clinic, I drove to the man of peace. I knocked on the door and entered. This time he wasn't alone. Next to him was a huge muscle-bound guy with a bag on his head, and he was wearing a nurse's outfit. "Hello, Jamal, a little early. This is Festus, my head nurse here at the facility," he said. Festus raised his hand. "Hello," I said. "You look upset. What's up?" "Sir, I'd like to ask you for something. Could I turn another patient today? I don't want any payment. I'll do it for free. And could you please make sure this patient doesn't run away? Please?" I said tearfully. "What does that mean? Get to the point, young man." "Sir, it's my sister. I was able to pay for her treatment, but it didn't work. She's dying anyway right now." Again, the man of peace seemed to be getting a headache. He had to concentrate hard to continue the conversation. Before he said anything, he signaled to Festus, and he started moving. When he opened the door, I didn't see the abandoned store, but a long, dark corridor with dozens of cells. "It won't help your sister if you turn her. I actually have other tasks at the moment, but you helped me, and you're on my team. If you play on my team, I won't let you down," he said. Festus came back in and gave me a test tube. "Give this to your sister. Then you will not tell your mother, but you will order her to go to the place I write on this note. You will follow as soon as you have compiled one last task for me. In this place, you'll be safe from what happens here, because I still need you, Jamal. I need you to do this task, and now you're in my debt, and will still have a lot to do for me. Perhaps more than either of us would like." Concerned, confused, I was given a small package and then left the office as instructed. Instead of going into the hallway, I ended up back in the abandoned store. But that wasn't important. I wouldn't have thought it possible how fast I could ride my bike. On the way, I thought about the words of the man of peace and all the news I had read recently about the walking dead, spider people, and plagues. The world was perhaps on the brink of the apocalypse, and it could well be that this was partly my doing. It took me less than an hour to get to the clinic. At the reception, I said that I had to see my dying sister, and the lady directed me to the palliative care ward. There I met my mother, who had apparently been waiting for me. I didn't like the fact that my sister was alone, but it certainly wasn't easy to watch her child die. I took her by the hand and went into my sister's room with her. I didn't recognize her at first. She was pale and emaciated and looked as if she'd been dead for a week. She looked at me but was no longer able to speak, but she smiled. That brought tears to my eyes. "Listen, Mom. What I'm about to tell you is no joke. You'll believe me as soon as Lily gets better. If you believe me, then go with her immediately to the address on this note. I'll be there as soon as I can." "What nonsense are you talking about, Jamal? Go sit with your sister and hey, stop it. What are you doing?" Before she could stop it, I tipped the other elixir into Lily's mouth. My mother pulled me away from her bed and slapped me across the face. She wanted to give me a lecture, but then she was distracted by a noise. It was a chuckle. Lily was sitting on the edge of the bed and emptying a 1.5-liter water bottle in one go. The color clearly returned to her face. It was unbelievable. Now she would believe me. I pressed the note into my mother's hand, smiled at my sister, and left the room. I still had something to do in the cellar. In a corner, I quickly changed into my nurse's outfit so I wouldn't stand out. According to the instructions, the dead woman was already prepared and all I had to do was give her the injection. She was laid out in the exact place the man of peace had described to me. While a man's scream rang out somewhere above me, I put the syringe in the dead woman and injected the greenish liquid into her stomach. After that, all I could see was the writing on her abdomen. It read, "Model 389, Mother." While the woman's belly inflated and I helped her to sit up as the man of peace had ordered me to do, I thought of my sister. I had made it. Shortly afterwards, I cycled to the address on the paper, went to our new apartment, and I heard gunshots and screams in the background. Then I remembered the last words on the note from the man of peace. These tests, this test world was necessary. Now we have a functioning army, and you will help me lead it, Jamal. You can have remorse, but don't regret anything. While I opened the door to our new apartment, I felt dizzy again, this time a lot more than usual. It was different here. It was daytime, and the sun wasn't as red as I was used to. It was more of a yellowish color. There were no monsters or undead here. Not yet. My sister was fine, but I wasn't. I'd sold my soul for her and doomed an entire world so that she could live. I had to live with that now.
Hey, horror fans! Do you want to learn more about the Man of Peace and his experiments? Then click here and subscribe to our channel. All stories on the channel are connected and tell one large story.